Call the meeting to order. It's 6:02. We have our minute taker, our timekeeper. I'm just gonna put in a little blurb. If you have not yet signed in on our sheet that's somewhere in the audience currently, if you could please put your name down for the minutes, that would be really helpful. All right, at this time, I'm gonna open the floor to public comment. We have a lot of faces I haven't seen in a while. Just a reminder, it's 3 minutes per person for public comment. If anyone wants to.
How do we do it if we're on Zoom?
Raise your hand and I'll give you a call out.
I don't see where to raise my hand.
Oh, it should be, yeah, it's down on the bottom, like taskbar. But Lisa, if you're ready, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to speak to a great concern about closing schools, particularly the Starksboro School. It's really the hub of the community. I've been involved since my children were little, and still now that my grandchildren are little, and seeing how much of a difference it makes. And I just feel like there's a lot that it brings to the community, and that there's other ways that we can save money. So I just want to speak to that concern about that being one of the options to close schools without the town being able to really weigh in.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, Nancy.
I'm Nancy Cornell from Starksboro. I have a couple of it's one kind of big question. That is, aside from reducing or consolidating educational delivery models, what other cost-saving measures have been considered and thoroughly explored? The New Solutions K-12 report in 2021 that was commissioned by the Mausd administration analyzed really a whole variety of cost-containing measures that would not require closing any schools, but would lead to significant savings. My question is, what less radical and less divisive options like those in the report, or those, particularly those in the report, will MAUSD be considering, and when will the board be exploring options such as those?
Thank you, Nancy. Any other public comment at this time? Yeah, Dave?
Thank you for taking public comment. So, I've been thinking about this.
That's Dave Sharp, Bristol.
Hi. I've been thinking about this process for quite a long time. As some of you may know, the process of thinking about what to do with our schools, I start from what problem are we trying to solve? And in my view, the problems that we're trying to solve are at the high school level, where we're trying to deliver AP Calc, and at the same time, we're trying to train people for trades that we desperately need in this state and in this country. And there's this roadblock, hurdles between for children to take advantage of what's happening at the Hannaford Career Center and other tech centers. As you have all seen, the latest proposal from the Act 73 committee, and I think that's what they're called, to design new borders, right? It's thinking roughly about Addison County. So I think that when this board thinks in current events about how to save money or improve education, we're constrained to think about our elementary schools and Mount Aid. If the state were to force us to think about the county, that opens up a whole different dialogue and conversation Might we be better off doing that now before the state forces us to do something? To think about how we can act as a county to solve these problems that are primarily at the high school level and take away the threat to closing elementary schools, which raises a lot of concerns from the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Susan Fiber from Starksboro. I'll try to make this brief because I haven't thought it through real well, but I was looking at the survey this afternoon and results, and I know you're going to talk about that at the meeting. And if any of you, I'm sure you've looked at it, but the obvious one that received overwhelming support, that whatever the percentage was something to the word to the effect of excellence in achievement for kids or something like that, whatever it was. That's like motherhood and apple pie. Of course, that's what we all want. I don't feel like there's been much attention given to academics, to achievement. We've been looking at buildings. We've been looking at whether second grade's going to be here, third grade's going to be here. We're going to have a pre-K. I don't feel like there's been much discussion or thought about academic achievement, what's actually happening in schools, elementary school, high school, and what effect any of this might have on actual student achievement. And I think that's something that needs more attention. I don't have any answers. I just think we haven't looked at that at all. And that's what it should be all about. It's what people are saying. But where is any kind of evidence that we've looked at that? And what is the evidence about achievement and what kids are actually learning in classrooms? Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, Karen.
Thanks. I'm Karin McCarthy. I'm a Starksboro resident and I attended school here in the district. I believe that high quality education is the lifeblood of a thriving democracy. I want our schools to offer the best education possible, just like you, utilizing data and analysis to inform the options presented to the communities for a vote. I'm not afraid of change, and I don't believe that bigger is necessarily better. We do need to address increased expenses, and I'm hoping that you'll consider ways to do so without sacrificing schools, teachers, or community input. We've done the research. According to the 2021 Levinson report, based on analysis, MAUSD can maintain 5 small elementary schools in the community if the community, school leaders, and central office embrace the cost-effectiveness mindset. Indeed, according to the Levinson report, MAUSD could opt to double down and maintain community schools if it took other decisive actions that are within its control. The report explicitly states that closing or repurposing schools without community input is not advisable, nor in alignment with the goals of the community. The state redistricting task force has recently included a study of the Board of Cooperative Educational Agencies, BOCES, using feasibility work supported by the Vermont Learning Collaborative. Data demonstrates that regional cooperation can expand capacity and generate substantial savings, ranging from 25% to 80% for certain shared services. BOCES are not new. They have 7 decades of data and are widely used across New York State and New England. Has the board considered how coordinated regional infrastructure can simultaneously improve quality and control costs while maintaining local representation? Why has this not been discussed in depth as an option for effective cost savings?
Thank you, Karen. Any other public comment? Yeah, Teresa.
Hi, sorry, I can't get my camera to work, but I piggyback on the last comment that there's been a lot of research done by the community, but it doesn't seem like the school board has really looked into yet the cutting costs from the top down instead of taking it away from our teachers and our schools when there's plenty of cost cutting that could be done at the administrative level. So I'm really hoping that the school board looks into that much, much further and deeper before anything is moved forward that would potentially take away some really great academics for our children, because we have thriving, really great small schools right now. So it would be really sad to see them go for no reason when costs could be cut from the top down. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Oh, Krista?
Hey, folks. Good to see you all, and thanks for the hard work you're doing. The conversations are definitely not new to me. But I haven't been paying as close attention to your particular work. I've been thinking more about it at the statewide level, and most particularly in my role working with the Vermont Family Network, where we are supporting families of children with disabilities. And in that role, we are regularly hearing from families across the state whose children are either not receiving services at all or really inadequately being served in the ways that they deserve and that they're legally entitled to be served under the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. I'm really interested in the BOCES model that the previous speaker spoke to, primarily because one of the main focuses of that report is around how it might grapple with the increasingly high costs of special education and the lower outcomes for students on IEPs. And so I think that's something really interesting to keep an eye on, is how those conversations at the state level evolve. But here at the local level, I remain really concerned about those voices of families of children with disabilities and our capacity as a district with continued cuts to continue to serve those children and families in the ways that they deserve. So I really strongly encourage the board to be thinking very specifically about special education delivery and what we're doing well and what we're really unable to do because of the nature of our current district and the way it's set up. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Krista. Any other public comment at this time?
Yeah.
Yep, Alan?
I think we need to hear the board, but one of the things that I think could work is giving responsibility to schools, getting info from the state on the number of students in each K through 12. And we have like Darkborough close to Huntington. If Huntington had 4 kids in 4th grade, Starksboro has 6 kids in 4th grade, although I'm not seeing that right now. If you look at the numbers, they're not that bad. So we need to have more time for the different schools, principal, maybe somebody, a teacher or something, to look at the population K through 12. So that we can share teachers, because teachers are the key. And so one of the things that I'm thinking too is teachers are the key, give them the responsibility, give them more time in the summer, more physical services, so that we can work a little better in keeping the costs down, because salaries, as we know, are 70% of the budget. So let's look around, get the state to give us permission to look around at the other school districts. So then you say, well, the teacher's on a different contract. That doesn't matter, because they could still get their contractual fee. So there's a lot of things that I think we're not doing that we ought to be doing. And I'll tell you, I visited probably 50% of the schools in the state. I never saw the poorest communities wanted to keep their schools, because the school is 24/7. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to close this section of public comment. There will be another one. So we're gonna move on to our next item, which is an action item to approve the agenda. Can I please get a motion?
So moved.
Kathy first. Mike second, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. We're gonna move down then to the board management and governance section, which starts with a quick discussion. So you all saw the survey that I sent to you and just asked for feedback on. I did take feedback from some board members and put that into a response. I did ask for an extension, but she did not allow an extension, so I did my best to take all the discussions we've already had, sort of meld them into one and submit that as our response. So MAUSD did provide a response.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Is that response gonna be available to?
Yeah, I did get something back. I just can't find it right now, but I will send that to
Okay,
you,
thanks a
because I
lot.
did get that back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoever. There's a second sheet in that folder. So next we're gonna hear from Truex Cullen's architects. So we have the 7 previous options that we have, so we'll go over those and then we'll hear other things about those options and more. So we're gonna welcome up Truex Cullens.
And can we interject quickly?
Yeah.
Our student school board rep is here. She.
Oh, yay.
He headed to the cider and donor concert with Lily when he's back over here.
Yeah, Lily.
Well, he's here. She's here.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
All right, so we have, I'm gonna see if I get your name right. I've been practicing. Pam Featherston, huh? Scott, did I get it? And Stefan Poston from Truex Collins. So Truex is the architectural firm that we've been using for a lot of our projects recently. And after the last board meeting, I learned of work that they were doing with other communities, wrestling with some of the same things. And thought there sort of was a value add for their work and looking at the reports that we've been sort of narrowed down to. And they discovered a couple of others along the way that they're gonna share out a little bit about tonight. One of the things that I think was a great value add in what they were doing that was trickier for us to do. They're gonna show these in a long-term perspective, in a 30-year window. What kind of impact are we talking about? Because really, the kinds of things we're talking about are longer than a 1 or 2 year change. So having that perspective seemed really valuable. With that, I will start screen sharing so folks at home can see and turn it over to you guys.
While he's setting that up, I just wanna offer, we have a public comment that's after this whole section of discussion, and we have an action item. I'm gonna bump the public comment above the action item so that we can hear thoughts and feedback from you and answer any questions at the end of all the presentations. So it'll be sort of a time to go back and forth for any lingering thoughts.
Okay, yeah, thing.
You have extra ones available.
I think sure, yeah, no.
Something goes over, I don't have enough copies for everybody, but maybe put one for everyone.
Okay,
Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Cam Featherston. I'm a senior associate at Truex Collins in Burlington, Vermont. And with me is my colleague Stefan Poston. I'm an architect as well. At Truex Collins.
Oh. And the owl here is gonna be what will capture your video and audio.
Would it be better
Yeah,
To the owl and not addressing the large screen.
that's probably the best way to go, yes.
Okay, let's.
Right,
Right. All right, we've arrived. So Stefan and I are leaders in the K through 12 studio at Truix Collins. And I've been spending about the last 12 years focusing exclusively on public schools in Vermont. So we've been asked to take some of the options that the board has been debating and do some cost modeling of those options to see how does this play out over time. So without further ado, we'll get into it.
So to start with, what we're looking at here is cost modeling of options that have been selected by the board. Taking a look at them within the context of the state of schools in Vermont as things are right now. And then taking a look at the process overview. So we'll take you through what the process looks like. We'll take you through what we have found are the capacities of each of the schools in the community. We will then review the planning options that have been selected by the board to take a closer look at and go through the cost modeling process with you all to kind of take you through what these options look like on a building and cost basis over the next 30 years. And after that, we'll talk about next steps and take your questions.
So we've been doing this around Vermont, Northeast Kingdom, Southern Vermont, Central Vermont. And we found this Venn diagram that really kind of captures the conversation that we're all having at the statewide level. We're affected in my district too with this conversation in U32. They're talking about some schools closing for a couple of years. And the conversation really revolves around this issue of higher taxes and what is most important to Vermonters in our communities. Is it small local schools? Is it robust educational programming? Is it lower taxes? It feels a lot to many of us who study this that it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get all three. A little bit more about the Vermont context. In 2023, there was a statewide facilities evaluation done by Bureau Veritas. It was commissioned by the State Agency of Education. The findings were that there's about $6.3 billion worth of deferred maintenance statewide. That's billion with a B. This only counts replacement of equipment in kind. So that fan unit is 25 years old, needs to be replaced. This does not include any building enclosure upgrades for energy efficiency. This doesn't include any changes in mechanical systems or fuel sources. This doesn't include costs for modernization or upgrades to 21st century education. And currently the state has no plan to address or fund the repairs.
Replace.
Exactly. And so, the purpose of the study here, as we mentioned previously, was to provide the district with some numbers to put to the various plans. I'll try to speak louder. To put to the various plans that have been selected. And we want to take these plans and really compare them with each other to see if there are any plans that are relatively more advantageous for the district from a cost perspective. We can't speak to the community and education perspective, but certainly from a building standpoint, we can speak to that. And so to date, we know that 16 planning options were identified and were assessed by the board. After that, 7 of those were chosen for long-term financial modeling investigation. And then those were taken to us to investigate. And we added 2 that we thought would provide bookends to the conversation and a good point of reference. So you'll see those 2 as well tonight. But really, the goal for us is to be able to brief you on this process, to brief you on what we have found, and to help you to be more informed in your conversation going forward.
So let's talk a little bit about the capacities of the buildings that you're currently using. There was a NESDEC study done a few years ago that looked explicitly at the capacity of the schools. And one thing to note, the numbers that are on the screen are taken directly from the NESDEC report. The capacities done, analysis done by NESDEC was done the same way we would do it, in that
If there's a classroom being used as a classroom, it counts towards the capacity of the school. But if the classroom is being used for some other programming, it may have been built as a classroom 50 or 30 years ago. If it's being used as an office or special education or some other function now, it's not counted as a classroom. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's because we've generated a whole bunch of new jobs that people are doing in schools since these schools were built. Physical, occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, and the list goes on and on. Math intervention, reading literacy intervention, et cetera, et cetera. So we take the NESDEC report at face value, and we fundamentally agree with that assessment that they have. I will note, they do suggest that, and this is taken from the Moncton example, in Moncton, there are 3 classrooms being used for offices, small group instruction, et cetera. If reconfigured, the capacity could be increased by 75. We know that we can't just take those people and push them back into a paper closet. So we take the capacities as they've been reported by NESDEC.
Okay, here are the planning options. A list of them as the school board has developed them. And then here are the 7 that were selected that Kim and I will walk you through. And then there are an additional 2, as I said previously, that will sort of bookend the conversation and provide some additional points of reference and data for everyone to review together.
So and I'll just say that we asked to push these 2 back into the analysis because scenario H represents the most dramatic reorganization possible. And scenario G1, we were kind of riffing a little bit on scenario G, which was one of the developed options, but trying to configure the cohort of students in the buildings such that we would take the best advantage of the existing building square footage. So trying to really maximize the existing buildings in that option. So we just changed the cohort size a little bit. So we'll get right into it. I'll start off by saying, folks, these are really, really dense slides. We have made this presentation available to the school. We're going to follow up with a written report that will have all the same information in it. So if you don't memorize it all right now, it's okay. The information will become available. Scenario A is really the status quo. And in the status quo, you keep all the schools that you have open. They continue to have the same grade cohorts in them that they had. And you continue to pay for repairs and maintenance out of your annual budget, much the way that you have been operating for years now. So really not much changes in this option. Business as usual. We modeled another version of this where you don't change any of the cohorts or schools, still the same kids going to the same schools, but the one thing that you change is that you pay for the known deferred maintenance that you have with a municipal bond. That's the one change. That does really one big thing. It kind of locks in your costs for taking care of your deferred maintenance and repairs in today's dollars. And it says you're going to spend a lot of money, but you're going to pay it back over time. And that has a tremendous payback and savings because the cost of construction continues to go up. The cost of materials continues to go up. So paying for it in future dollars is more dollars.
But scenario B, as you can see on the map, essentially moves cohorts of students to different schools. So in this particular scenario, there are 3 K-8 schools, as well as at Bristol, a pre-K through 8. And Mount Abraham would revert back to being just a high school. This also, projected saving, but then with each of these scenarios that we're talking about now, construction and deferred maintenance is paid for with a bond rather than over time so that the change can be made at once. So there, again, over the bond period, there would be a significant savings over the status quo.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll continue to try to speak up.
Yeah, I can't hear either.
I'll do my best, folks. What we see here is that, is there a microphone?
We don't, they're doing the concert tonight, so we don't actually
Okay.
have.
Okay.
Just pretend you're there.
Or if you would like, you may come up closer if you would like. There's no reason you need to stay back.
Yeah, if you stand at the end of the table.
Yep, I can stand right out here.
Yeah.
Tell us where you want.
Yeah, where do you want
Is that better? All right,
Sit better for the community.
You're good.
We're good?
they're gonna look it up.
You try doing it just right. So in this case, as you can see, Mount Abe in one of the bullet points, Mount Abe is very underutilized at 30% utilization. Ken, would you like to explain what utilization means when we're speaking about it on these slides?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically a full utilization would be every single classroom is full all the time being used for teaching. Traditional high schools want to operate at about 75% utilization, which means about 75% of the classrooms are being used on a given day for the period. So if you have an 8-block schedule, the classrooms are full 6 out of 8 blocks. That makes sense.
Thanks, yeah. Do you want to take questions?
Not yet. I'm sorry, hold questions until we get through.
Next slide.
So scenario E is one where the proposal is to close 2 of the village schools and create 2 K-12 schools in the district. One of them would take pre-K, that would be in Bristol. An addition would be needed at Moncton because it's not quite large enough to take this full cohort. And Mount Abe stays underutilized.
You didn't mean K through 12.
I'm sorry. Yes, right. Moncton would be K-5, wouldn't be quite enough for that cohort. And Mount Abe would be 6 through 12. But this does have some payback over the long period.
Scenario F envisions 9 through 12. So again, Mount Abraham would be a high school only. Moncton would be grades 6 through 8. And then Bristol would have pre-K through 5. And what we see in this scenario again is that Mount Abraham has more space really than is needed for this particular scenario. And at Bristol, we found, just taking a look at the site and our experience there, that it would need an addition, but the site itself doesn't really lend itself to an easy or inexpensive addition. So, there would be some challenges to do with that.
Yeah, you can see Bristol is well over the capacity and it's even over the theoretical capacity. So the addition would need to be quite large, and that site is pretty well encumbered already with the buildings there. Scenario G1, this is one of the ones that we suggested get modeled. And that's because the opportunity here, what we did is we said, well, instead of a pre-K through 5, which was the original option G, we said, what about pre-K through 2 in the Bristol building? That actually fits. And it actually leaves enough room that you could put the district offices in that Bristol building as well, maybe in the south wing. So it's the best, most efficient use of the existing square footage in that you're kind of maximizing 2 of the buildings kind of to their fullest extent.
And then scenario H, we consider this one to be the most extreme scenario in that all kids in the district would be on a single campus. And so, that would require, some renovation of the high school in order to make that work. And there are certainly challenges too with, having all of the grade levels on a single campus and sort of separation of the different cohorts. And also, some kids just need more space. The littler kids need more space. Middle school kids in particular do need quite a bit of space as well. High school kids need less. So the building isn't currently suited to those separations of spaces. But we did take a look at this one to see what that would look like numbers wise.
Yeah, and
We'll take questions, I think.
we will take questions at the end. It's not, there are a few of these types of schools around the state. Winooski is a K through 12 in one building and Danville another one. So it's not unprecedented, but it's also not typical. So scenario I.4.1 is another one. This is actually pretty similar to I think scenario F in that it's a grade banded option. So grade banding, if folks aren't familiar with the term, is when you have all of the district's developmental cohort, so like K through 2 is a pretty common developmental cohort because they're all the little kids, have the same learning modes and everything. And so you put that cohort in one school, then you have the intermediate elementary regional school at Moncton. And then Mount Abe would revert again to a middle high school, a regional middle high school. So it's similar, but the cohorts are a little bit different than scenario F. And what it means is actually the additions are smaller. So I think that's why it performs a little better. One more note that, and I think this has been borne out, I think people have already looked into this, but remote schools that take full grades from a district, because you kind of got Bristol's kind of in the geographic center of a little bit of these towns. When their schools are remote and they take the full grade, but particularly when you have multiple schools that are taking full grade cohorts, it means the buses have more stops, right? So you have to add buses, so it can have an impact on travel costs if you want to keep the travel ride times down. So, but that's can be overcome.
This scenario that we looked at is very similar to the previous, except it flips the role of Robinson and Moncton. We found that this cost-wise is very similar, though Robinson is a little bit more challenging. The school in Starksboro has a sloping site, and also its oldest portion is the oldest building in the district. And so there are some limitations in how much intervention can actually be done to the building itself to bring it up to current codes.
And the last scenario that we were given to look at is 5.6. And this one is different than the others in that Moncton and Robinson would be closed. All the district's preschoolers would go to Beaman, and I think be housed with the district offices. All of the district's K through 4 students would go to Bristol, and all of the district's 5 through 12 students would go to Mount Abe Middle High School. The same thing as before. It's 416 students at Bristol over the capacity. It's even over the theoretical capacity. So an addition would be needed. It's a smaller, potentially more manageable addition. But Mount Abe remains unutilized or underutilized. But this option does have some pretty good projected returns on savings. So I just want to talk a little bit about the process. What are we doing? Where are these numbers coming from? So in our cost modeling that we do, we're looking at a 30-year outlook. And that's because bonds take about 30 years to pay back. So we're trying to figure out what's the payback period. We do account for ongoing maintenance in these plans for all of them. The amount of square footage that you're left with after reconfiguration has an impact because it's a percentage of the replacement value. So as you have less square footage, your ongoing maintenance burden also goes down. We use 3% of net replacement value, which is a number that comes from the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, which we actually got that from the State of Vermont Agency of Education. That was what they were looking at to figure out what would a reasonable contribution or budget number be for schools to budget for their maintenance. We do take into account capital renewal and deferred maintenance at either 4% of current replacement value or bond for the work that you need to do. New construction in these models is always paid for with a bond. And we get our information about the cost of financing from the Vermont Bond Bank. We also figure in salaries, benefits, and other things, fuels, etc. And that's the dark blue bars in these graphs. We have a graph for every one of the options, but we put 3 up to show examples. And as you can see, the salaries and benefits are by far and away the largest chunk of your budget. So for most of these options, there's some savings associated with the buildings and the condensation of buildings. Less square footage is less money over time. But for the vast majority of these options, the savings is being powered by reductions in salaries and benefits. We do include renovations for deferred maintenance. So that's always included in all the options, although for each option, as you retire buildings, we don't count the deferred maintenance for those buildings anymore. So some of the savings comes from retiring buildings and actually just not fixing them. Letting someone else fix them. We have a summary sheet that will be included in the report, just to kind of put it all at a glance. How's the district configured? What's the potential savings? And so that you can have it kind of all in one place. It's important to note, I think, also that these numbers are, this is a cost model that we've developed. And we've been running it for a couple of years, looking at how school districts are configured around Vermont. But this is not a promissory note that says, if you pick that option, you're gonna save that money. There's a host of assumptions and future decisions that have to be made in support of those assumptions for that savings to be realized. And what I would say, though, is that this is really valuable to articulate, I think, what is the strategic, at least from a financial perspective, where are their strategic advantages? So which ones are performing better? That's where I think this has value. As more so than, we're definitely gonna save this much money if we go down this road. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, so just to sort of summarize our findings as we undertook this exercise to look at the 7 scenarios that we were given. Our findings are that bonding for projects, it should make sense, bonding for projects is less expensive than paying for them over time. If you have a project that can't be paid for with your capital funds this year or next or the year after, it's less expensive to bond. Another finding, which holds true again with all of the districts that we have worked with in the state, less space and fewer facilities means there's greater long-term savings. There are fewer things to replace. There are fewer heating systems. There are fewer gyms to wax every summer. It follows that fewer buildings will be less expensive to maintain. But also that if reconfiguration is decided upon, there will be some upfront costs in investing in the buildings. None of the buildings is perfect as it is, of course. They all need some upgrades. And in order to do any of these refigurations, there generally is some sort of addition needed at any of the schools that's included. And then investment is also needed, as we've seen across the state, for equity of space. And it's up to the community to decide, does every school have a dedicated nursing staff? Does every school have a place for unified arts, for music and art, or these, part-time roles? But if there's going to be equity across the district in all the schools, in general, they don't all have the same strengths. So some of that needs to be addressed in some of the schools.
Yeah, I'll just note that based on the legislation that's already been passed, we are accounting for equity of programming in all of these scenarios and all the planning options that we do for every school district. Just because we think that that's something that's people are asking for and it's also the right thing to do. So it's baked into our analysis. We would need to do more detailed concept design to sort of drill down on that and give you a list of specific rooms. But we're using square foot multipliers for schools that would provide for that level of service, whether the school is 2 sections per grade or 4 sections per grade. So it's baked in at this time. Oop. So kind of the final thoughts, this is just from us. We're Vermonters, we're living through this same as you, but we have a job to do. And Truex Collins was asked to model long-term financial impact of reorganization of school buildings and grade configurations in the Mount Airy School District. However, we recognize this is a complex issue involving more than building plans and budgets. In addition to potential cost savings, there are many emotional, educational, social, community, and extracurricular benefits to consider for students, parents, teachers. And our role here is not to make a recommendation, but to provide data for informed community decisions. And now we had planned on taking some questions. Is that appropriate at this time?
That's fine. Yes, that's fine. The board feel comfortable with, great, yeah.
Meredith had her hand up.
Yeah.
I'll try and be visual, but 1, 2, 3.
So, you started talking about capacities in classrooms. Did you also consider other capacities? Gym space, outdoor play and learning space, cafeteria space, and presentation space like auditoriums? Did you take those capacities of those buildings into account in your modeling?
So our modeling looks at essentially how big should it, you have a planned cohort, let's pick a scenario. Like, I'm making this up, so this is not from the report, but scenario Z, there's 300 kids going to Moncton. 300 elementary school students in a cohort 5 through K through 5 should have this many square feet per student to have an appropriately appointed school. We compare that size to the existing Moncton building to see, does it fit or does it not? So we are trying to, at a very high level, understand, does this building have the capacity to provide these services? Yes or no? The next step that we can talk about in a bit, if people want to go down that road, is to do a more granular analysis using floor plans and site plans. They really drill down on the space program of each building to make sure that all of the services that are needed, provided for equitably between all the schools in a given scenario. I hope that answers the question. You were next.
Thank you. So I'm curious about, you made a mention of, I'm from Starksboro. You made a mention of, Robinson not being being the oldest in the district and I thought I heard not up to code. One of the questions, the main question I have is, has there been an analysis of the fitness of each of these facilities? So that's what, one of the things that seems to me to be a necessary calculation, like what's the state of each of these buildings and how much would it take to renovate them as is?
Yes, yes, so that has been included in the analysis, and that information is built upon the facility evaluations that were done either last year or 18 months ago, something like that. Very recent look at each building in the district, its current condition, what it would take to get it kind of up to snuff.
Okay.
And that is baked into all of these analysis.
Okay, can I just add a little
Yeah, go ahead.
B question, and my recollection of Mount Aid, this particular high school, is that there was a tremendous amount of renovation and maintenance needed, such that there was almost a doubt as to whether that was feasible. Is that, am I not remembering that correctly?
Stefan, you worked on the facility evaluations. Do you want to speak to this?
Sure, I think, by virtue of, its size and the age of the school, it needs more dollars put into it than the other schools. It's much, much larger. It's 158,000 square feet or so. I don't believe there was, that the report made a value call on whether it was wise or doubtful to do that work, but rather just pointed out that a certain amount of work is needed. And yes, it is a much larger amount of money. It's an old school and it's a very large school. In my analysis, as well as the engineer who worked on our team, I don't think that there were any issues that seemed insurmountable. Of course, with enough money, anything is surmountable, right? If it's really, that's it.
It's a $33 million problem.
Right.
I will say, this is a good time to have something positive, some positive feedback. In our analysis, we also have, this is really one of the most forward-thinking districts in terms of you folks have been putting money into your buildings and you've been budgeting very close to an appropriate amount, very close to the recommendations, which, by the way, almost nobody in the state is doing. We haven't found a district yet that's budgeting what the state thinks is a reasonable amount. But this district is the closest. And we also find that the school buildings are they do require work because they're old. It's just what happens to buildings as they get older. They're in better shape than other districts in the state. So although it's not as efficacious to keep paying for everything in your annual budget, it has been an effective way to stem the tide. And there are some statistically significant results from that in our analysis. So your buildings are not in perfect shape, but they're in better shape than other districts we work with. So I just wanted to give that feedback to people that it is working. It's a big lift.
I should note that the full Truax report is available, I think on the it's on the
Yeah.
website.
Yes.
So you can get a full breakdown of all of the buildings.
And real quickly, before we move on, to clarify the question about Robinson specifically, it's a sloping site, which makes development of the site just a little bit more challenging. And one of the portions of that building is the oldest piece of construction in the district. I think that was the point.
And did you say it's not up to code or? is that-
I mean, there's,
Those were my words, and I could speak to that. There are code deficiencies in all of the schools. And given, the construction, type and age, at Robinson, there are certain areas that would require a little bit more work. Rebuilding of exterior stairs, for example, because of the sloping site. Older floor thresholds that where you get floors that you either need to choose to restore these classic floors or replace them entirely. There's a little bit more work there either way than, say, in a newer portion of the same school that might just have VCT floors and gypsum walls. So it's just, the character of each of the buildings is a little bit different. So fixing them up is a little bit different at each location. And I was just noting again that Robinson has the oldest portion in the district, and there's a little bit more care required.
it's a more difficult, I think that really we were trying to compare Robinson and Moncton because those two scenarios are the same. It's just swapping Robinson and Moncton. And the difference there is that Moncton is on a flat site and it's a flat school. So that's where that kind of comment about sloping comes from. We got a question here, and then there was two gentlemen over here that had questions.
Before my question, I have two comments on what you just said. First of all, the oldest part of Robinson is not used for classrooms. And I would say that the site it's sloping, but so is Moncton, just not as much. Hard to find flat land in Vermont. My question, I couldn't hear the first part of the presentation, so I may have missed it. But I didn't hear a scenario that sounded like, to me, perhaps the best option, which is exemplified by CBU to the north. Basically move the middle school students out to all the elementary schools. Close the middle school, convert it into district offices. Big classrooms, low office partitions, do an inexpensive conversion and save on busing. It seems like that. I understand that educationally, CBU district is doing pretty well. So might be well to emulate them.
So that is one of the options. I think that's scenario B. Is that correct?
And of course, that makes sense. That
If it was the first one, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, this was the first one that wasn't status quo. Yeah, we don't have an axe to grind here. I will share that my broad experience across the state is that we're working with more districts that are trying to move away from remote K-8 schools. That most districts that we're working with right now are trying to build regional middle schools because it's a real staffing challenge. And there may be others who are more knowledgeable that can speak to that, but hiring enough middle school teachers to staff these very small middle schools has been a challenge in many other districts. So, but it's still one of the options under consideration as far as.
I didn't hear in that first option to talk about moving the district into the middle school. One of the big advantages, I think, of that option is that populations do shift, school populations. It wasn't that many years ago that Mount Aid was seriously considering a major addition. Right? That was like, how long ago was that? 10, 15 years ago? Not long ago. And 10 or 15 years from now, we could be back to where we were in the eighties with school population and needing every classroom that we now have. And by moving, not really closing schools, keeping all the classrooms, just temporarily, you might say, converting the middle school into offices. So it could be reconverted, when it's needed.
Yeah, I think it's there and all worth further discussion.
A couple gentlemen over here.
Yeah, I've got, I was wondering, who did the assessment on the building? Did you both do that or?
Yes, we did.
The next thing is, we talk about the old section of Robinson, and Jeff pointed out that's not used for classrooms anyway. I'd like to point out that the two additions that were put on back in the late eighties, early nineties are newer than Mount Airy. I'd also like to point out that Buckton, the soils over there for septic are terrible. It's gonna cost a fortune if you add on to that building.
That's a great point.
Whereas Robinson has good soil and a lot of it. So I don't know if we take that into consideration or not, but I think you should.
I think that we found that, through the facility evaluation process, there was some issues over there. So, good point. Here and then here.
So my question is, that this school had air quality problems. Is that all fixed now, or does the school heat? Is the air quality good? And the roof is not leaking? Okay, so this school in 2000, I believe, had 1,100 students. Robinson had 200 students. I'm an educator, I was an educator. My thing is not the building or the room, it's what happens in the building and the room. So if we spend a lot of money on the building, what about the teachers? The teachers need assistance, they need help. We have an extraordinary amount we're 1.9 students here. So we have a budget of $34,000 per student. And if you call that's the weighting. So we need to look at how do we get the education, not the building. If the building is not safe, yes. If the fire code is not up to date, fire extinguisher, whatever, in the building, that's serious. But what I'm seeing here, we're losing pupils. We have 1,100 students right now in this city. In 2020, 2000, we had probably 1,700 students in the district. So my thing is, we need to work on the best quality education. Students don't care if the room's warm, the air quality is good, and what's going on. That's what counts for a good education. The library is well, the other areas are well done. So the other thing we're not looking at, if you said Moncton is overcrowded. Well, what about Starksboro? Starksboro's not overcrowded. It's a little bit of a track on a dirt road for Moncton students to go to Starksboro. I don't believe first, second, and third graders should be on the bus a long time in that. But fifth, sixth graders, they could travel. So we need to look at more than just what you're presenting here. We need to look at how does it influence the quality for the students? And students just want active educators to teach. Thankfully.
Exactly.
Wholeheartedly agree.
And just remember that there's folks.
Yeah, I'll get
Oh,
that's good.
Thank you. Sorry, you'll have-
No.
you'll have to
Yeah.
get that.
We have one more in the room and then we'll jump online. I am gonna put a time limit of 10 more minutes to answer questions in this section though, so we can keep moving through everything. Okay,
Board members have a chance to ask?
Yes, yeah. Thank you for your time. I understand it's just been about a month that you've had to look at this since the decisions were made in September. So, that's a short timeline. I guess I have a question for the board. And that is the goal of the board, the maximization of the buildings? And if so, how are outdoor classrooms to be considered? We have a lot of capacity for outdoor learning. There's a lot of interest in outdoor learning. And that seems like we could really be creative in how we use our classroom spaces so that there doesn't need to be a designated classroom for each individual student, but there could be shared indoor spaces and a lot of outdoor resources that expand learning opportunities. I'd like to understand how anticipated educational outcomes will be assessed. This doesn't address the student experience, the community. I think would really like to know how students will factor into this calculation. And I'd like to state that I think this presumes that the district would be selling back the community schools to those towns. And those cost savings wouldn't be afforded to the district if the town doesn't buy them back.
That's true, and I thought I mentioned that, but yeah, this presumes that the district, like gets rid of buildings that are not used as schools anymore. And for that matter, I mean, I'll go one step further and I'll say that it doesn't recognize any tax savings if the town buys it back and turns it into a teen center or something, because the town still has the cost of maintaining and repairing the building. So they really need to be taken on by someone else entirely, otherwise they're just taking the money out of one pocket. So that's totally fair. As far as the educational impacts, a lot of that, so we're architects and we're not educators, so we do rely on the educators to provide that information. Although I'll just say, my one little kind of hobby horse, and it comes from my own personal experience growing up, and we've heard this reported around the state by many people, is that one of the big advantages that people see and I get it, people, they love their local schools for good reasons. It's usually central to the community, it's very convenient. There's a lot of good reasons for that. There are schools in Vermont where the cohorts are so small that you end up with students who are in a class with so few of their colleagues and their peers that, like, if they end up being bullied, for instance, they have no other cohort to resort. Right? Most of the studies that have been done, the scientific and academic studies that have been done on the benefits of small schools. Small school in those instances is 400, like 4 classrooms per grade. In Vermont, we have like a lot of micro schools. They come with their own set of challenges and benefits. So there can be benefits for students psychologically, socially, particularly at the middle school level. This is like one of the big things. Maybe it's not as critical at the elementary level. Middle school level, their bodies are changing, their emotions are changing, their social outlook is changing, and they really do need a significant cohort. So, but as I said, I'm not educated. As far as the actual, grade point average increase type assessment, I can't do that. I could just give you kind of what I've heard from others.
but we will get into it. So everybody in the audience knows, we have a group of educators here that are gonna speak to that exact point
Thank you.
after we're done with this.
Thank you.
Okay, online, Lisa?
Here, we can turn, sorry, you guys, get this side now.
Yeah, I have a question about the preschool and whether the preschool is drawing from all of the towns. The preschool in Starksboro has just done a huge renovation with the meeting house, has done a huge renovation. And which is intended to, it's been going for 50 years and intended to go, another 50 years, and to basically gut that program would be sort of disastrous. So I didn't know whether this plan, it's really hard to follow that plan. It's a lot of information. It's hard to absorb it all in this kind of meeting. So that was a question, is whether your plan is to basically have all the preschoolers go to one school. And the other question was, it doesn't make sense to me to basically close a school and then have to do an addition to another school. But it may be that I'm just not, it's just such complicated math that I need to absorb it in a, by looking at the report further.
Yeah, no, I understand the confusion and because it's not necessarily intuitive, but a key to understanding it lies in the cost over time to maintain facilities. For instance, a gymnasium a single gymnasium can serve 400 to 450 elementary school students just as easily as it can serve 100. And so the long-term knock-on impacts of maintaining that in space over time has higher cost than putting a small addition at another school. That's the trade-off, and that's you see that in the analysis in the long-term savings number, but you also see it in the analysis there's a line for percentage of budget towards buildings. And we see in the analysis that as you reduce square footage and as you increase the size of the facilities and as you decrease the number of facilities, that amount of money being put towards buildings goes down.
Okay.
The more buildings you have, the more of the money that you raise from taxes goes to the support of the buildings, as opposed to just going into teacher salaries or benefits, et cetera.
Okay, how about the preschool question? Because I would really hate to see all of that. I'd hate to see that huge, that all that money for the renovation got a program.
I'm gonna kick that one to Patrick.
So we currently serve about 30 pre-K students in our pre-K program. All the rest of the pre-K students are in private provider programs. The models that you're looking at don't change that at all.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Eugenie?
Yeah, I just have one a question and one a comment. I didn't see a figure or figures for transportation costs in this. So that would be something to look at. Looks like more buses running. I mean, it depends on the scenario, but that's a question. And then the other thing is I kind of question the capacity of the Moncton School. I don't have the figure right in front of me, but I believe when we did the addition in Moncton, about 20 years ago, it was built for 225 students. So I'm not really sure. You said there's some classrooms that are not they're used as offices, but I think that's just because there is the space right now. I don't think Moncton would need another addition. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. So I'm gonna move it to the board. I'm gonna
Very briefly,
Yeah.
I'll just say, I believe Floyd if you could confirm for me that the busing is part of the financial analysis that we received from the district and incorporated into our study. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to
No,
be a
I'm
curveball.
trying to think which financial modeling. I know that we did back. When we were looking at combining with Addison Northwest and that impact in busing, I think that was what we used as the basis for transporting. So there should be an increase in there.
Our conversations with the bus company on these models, so we talked to the bus company about all 16 models. None of the 7 models that emerged, in the bus company's opinion, required additional buses.
Oh, okay, that's great.
There were scenarios that in the original 16 where we were using all buildings and grade banding, where it just became sort of a web of transporting kids to different places that would require a bus per town at somewhere around $75,000 per bus per year.
And I heard the comment about the capacity at Moncton, and I heard another comment about capacity out here. And I'll just say for the group, the capacity is not one number. And there would be reconfiguration, at least internal reconfiguration to raise the capacity above the number that was in the NESDEC report, although we do find that that's possible. Typically. So could the number be larger than what's shown in the NESDEC report? Possibly with some reconfigurations, construction of offices, kind of squeezing people around. And that would be uncovered in the next layer of analysis, which would involve actual floor plans. That's what I was getting at with kind of a possible next step, sort of define that.
Related to the busing, can you speak to how much time students, like the increased bus time that students would be expected to be riding?
Our conversation with the bus company was that in the scenarios where, again, that was more of a web when we were using all buildings and grade banding, that adding a bus per town would be able to keep similar bus ride times to what we have currently.
But without adding, you, before you had just referenced not needing to add any buses, so I'm curious if we're not adding buses, what the ride time would be.
Right, so for the most part, the ride time, right now, all the buses make their routes and then come to Bristol and bring students to Mount Aid. So effectively, the routes could be very similar. It would be longer for elementary students because the distance between the elementary school and then coming into Bristol, if that was happening, would be the addition. But the buses themselves aren't making any different routes.
I guess I don't need to keep introducing, but I know that when I was a student at Robinson, it was an hour-long bus ride just to Robinson at least, and I was the first on and the last off. And for those students who are already experiencing that and then being expected to band and relocate across the county, I would want to understand who has the longest route and how long that really is and how it affects the kids on bus.
Sure, it's a fair ask. We've been doing this work all over the state. And most of these districts are similar size. The reason is because the state already did this work in the sixties. And I don't mean to belabor this point, I'll be quick.
Belabor.
The state did this work in the 1960s when they created all these union high schools. They looked and they carved up the state into these 1 hour chunks, essentially. And what we have found in working with districts around the state at the district level is exactly what Patrick has been saying, is that, and in some cases, consolidation actually reduces the bus timeline, which is, I mean, I know some people don't necessarily want to hear that, but when you only have one place for the buses to all go to, one destination, now bus rides can be simplified. And there are few stops for kids to make. So, and we find that when operating within that kind of union district boundary that was set up in the sixties, it's pretty flexible in that hour-long ride, although there are a few outliers, some districts that are like 75 minutes.
I just want to make sure that we're analyzing it and not speculating.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
thank you.
Fair enough.
So I'm gonna let the board ask a few questions. It looks like Meredith, you're back. So I know you had your hand up if you want to do first, and then I really like, we have like 4 other things to do, so, but I want to make sure people get their initial building questions answered. So Meredith, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Erin. Really quick, what do savings look like if we can't pass a bond?
Is it that for just option A?
All of the options.
Okay.
You can't, I don't think it's feasible for you to budget your way out of this. I mean, I don't think the savings are predicated in the status quo option, the savings are predicated on bonding. Because you lock in your costs in today's dollars. You know, you borrow a bunch of money at a low interest rate and you pay for the work today, but then you pay it off over time. And if you don't bond for the project, it means that in 10 years, you have to raise money for that project in 10 years dollars. What's the word you've been dealing with? Money worth less? Inflation is gonna cause the dollar to be devalued over time, and you'll need to raise more and more dollars for the work to be done. That's in addition to the cost of construction also escalating over time, usually faster than inflation. So construction costs raise on a steeper slope than inflation. So as time marches on, you have to raise more and more money. So I would have to think long and hard about whether or not there are savings possible if you don't bond for work to be done.
Thank you.
I mean, there are some savings in some salaries and benefits, but none of these options that we looked at, according to our analysis, none of the options that we looked at were possible without an addition somewhere. Every scenario, in some cases, it's very small addition. But there are none of these reconfiguration options that we looked at were possible without an addition somewhere.
Anyone else on the board?
I really appreciate your input, and I appreciated the first Truex Collins report when we first established the facilities committee, and now to see the update and these projections, it's incredibly helpful, and I really want to thank you for the effort you put in on this and the expertise you bring to our table.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, a bunch of little questions that came up, and I remember when you were discussing option B, right, of K through 8, and you were talking about a significant reduction in students because of tuition issues. I didn't fully understand that.
Yeah, that was me, a significant reduction in students at Mount Abe. Because there would be no more middle school students here at the high school.
Well,
there is also.
And you're talking about Lincoln, right?
There is, no, well, maybe, possibly, yes, so there is so in the so we were given a lot of work that had been done by the district. To build out this projection. And my understanding, I don't want to speak out of school, is that those analyses, those projections internally. Did not account for tuition in middle school students if you don't have a regional middle school. So I think if you look back,
well,
all of the other scenarios account for 1,123 students in the district, and that one scenario B accounts for 1,107. Because I think there are like 16.
And I just don't understand. And I'd like to look at the assumptions, and maybe that's a Patrick question.
Yeah, it's a
but you seem to build it into your cost savings, so that's what I'm asking you. The other issues I had to do, the comment about unused buildings is a real issue. There were a few districts that made a bad decision to take over the school buildings, when they were merged or whatever. And I think most school districts are gonna be very leery about that. So was that taken into account when you were talking about the cost savings? Were you assuming that, not having the facility to take care of is gonna save you money? The district money? That's what I was hearing.
Yes, the assumption is that if you're no longer going to, I'm gonna pick on somebody, if you're no longer going to have the Beaman School function as a school.
Right.
Then the Beaman School property is going to become somebody else's property to own. Will no longer be owned by the district.
And I think that's an assumption that, bears looking at a little more closely. So you talked about equity, and I understand you folks, you're dealing with architectural issues, you're dealing with capital costs, facilities costs, and things like that. It was just surprising that you talked about equity. And I think you were talking about it in terms of space.
Yes.
There are huge issues of equity that are involved when you close a school. I'm not asking you to know that, that's not your bailiwick. It just was disturbing to me to hear you talk about equity and, it's, do this, close schools, move them to larger schools and you'll have better equity. And there's some real issues around that, that I feel, you don't, that's not your bailiwick.
It was just a different definition of equity.
What?
It was just a different definition of.
I know, but he was talking about, this is so important for people. Yes, it is important for people.
Yeah.
And I think the message was, equity will be promoted if we do such and such and such.
That's just
Yeah.
briefly.
Yeah.
But I think that the point that we were trying to make was that in any scenario of reconfiguration, if the buildings are going to provide the same level of experience and services to all of the kids around the district, then some reconfiguration in the schools is needed in order to have the same types of spaces that would support the same types of services that students receive.
But, and I think you're focusing on space and that's your job. I'm just saying that equity has a lot more there are a lot more factors that you need to consider when you're talking about equity for students and low-income students and marginalized students. And the impact of closing a school on some of these, some of these folks in small communities, the equity impact can be very, very big.
We agree with that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
And I won't. What else? That's it for now.
Okay, anyone else have questions on the board? Yes.
Just a generic one. I appreciate very much the presentation and,
Can you speak up?
oh yes, I'm so sorry. So I very much appreciate the presentation. I was wondering if you might be able to help like put into context the scale of these savings. Like I love the approach to model this out over 30 years. But then you start to get numbers like $600 million of savings. And I was having a hard time personally trying to understand what that meant today, what that meant in 10 years, in terms of what the impact on taxes, what the impact on a budget might be. So maybe to just give you a broad line of thinking about that, like that's $20 million a year averaged over the 30 years if it was $600 million, right?
Something like that, although it's more in future years.
Well, that's the, I think that, and so this is
It's everything
ramps.
escalates over time.
exactly, and that's the part I'm trying to understand, because on the one hand, our budget this year is $35 million,
Right.
give or take. So obviously, that's a huge chunk that we can't save in 1 year. But if you take your 5% inflation for 30 years, I think the quick Excel math said our school budget, and everyone should take a deep breath before this, would be $144 million a year in 30 years from now at a 5% escalation. So, so between 35 million and 144 million, and now we have a big number of 600 million. Like what does it mean to save that money on that time scale? Like, how do you view that? If that makes
Yeah,
sense?
one of the slides we had was a district summary, and it actually gave it as a percentage too. So because these are huge, these numbers are eye popping, and I look at them and I'm like, I spent like a day going back through the material.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, we're gonna say this, we have to be sure. And because these numbers are continually eye popping, but I will say they're also in line with other districts that we've been studying around the state. And in particular, when you get a district that has a number of remote, or not remote, but a number of village schools that are spread around and you consolidate them into one location, you generate typically between 20 and 25% savings in the district over the long haul. That's been what we've found in multiple districts around the state. And, it's so they're eye-popping numbers, but I'm kind of getting used to them.
That's very helpful context.
Remember, this is all in the context of, we have a $6.3 billion bill statewide for schools. So, and that's in today's dollars. So.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else before we say thank you so much? Okay. Thank you very much for your time and your work on this, and very much
Thank
appreciated.
you all. I just really want to say thank you for the space and the time to have these conversations. I know that they're emotional. I've been going through them in my own district too. So thank you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Okay. Next we have some MAUSD staff here. They were, and I'll kind of hand it over to Patrick to sort of set the stage, but they're here to help us see from their lens the 7 options that we have to think about currently.
So for some context, amongst the crowd, we have most of the team of administrators and most of the district advisory council. The district advisory council was instrumental last year in brainstorming a lot of different options. The context that they were working under last year was sort of, here are the parameters, the guardrails. If we could redesign how we deliver education in MAUSD, that first and foremost improved outcomes for students, secondly, improve the teaching experience for teaching staff, and thirdly, could save some money. What ideas do you have for how we can do that? They spent effectively the whole year sharing their time between that work and engaging with the Up for Learning team that helped draft our portrait of a learner. So they're here to share their experience. Some of the members are new this year and weren't part of that last year, but some members are here that were engaged in that work last year. And we have our administrative team that was sort of kept in the loop along the way all throughout the last year. So really folks that can speak to the educational components that have come up, which of course is the most important out of all of this. The savings is kind of a have to because of our financial reality, but we're still in the business of educating students and doing the best we can with what we have for meeting those needs. So the advisory council specifically organized our October 2nd in-service day to gather feedback from the entire instructional staff in MAUSD around these 7 options. And to hear from the educators, from the folks that will be delivering this education, what they think about all of this. So I won't put words in their mouths. They organized this. They're linked in the document. I think sent under separate cover actually was the summary that the advisory council created that said, here's what staff said about these options. So
Is that a link on the agenda? Is that-
it was sent under separate cover. It will become a public document,
It hasn't been sent out to the public.
It hasn't.
Thank you.
but we could read that.
Yeah. We'll put it up. Please hold.
Make a presentation. So we understand.
I think it's going to be more of the post you're all mailing.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna put up.
I'll just read it out loud and then if folks have questions, we can turn it over to the advisory council and perhaps the admin team as well. The admin team was involved in facilitating some of the discussions that happened on the October 2nd in-service day. So again, have been instrumental in the process along the way. The following summary synthesizes staff feedback collected across the Mount Abraham Unified School District, including perspectives from Beaman, Moncton, Robinson, Bristol, Mount Abraham Union High School, and district level personnel. Data was drawn from multiple formats, including survey responses, hybrid group sessions, and building-based discussions to capture a broad cross-section of teacher and staff experiences. While this summary does not encompass every data point collected, it reflects the most consistent and representative themes emerging from a substantial body of input gathered to date. Additional analysis will continue as more qualitative data are reviewed. However, the findings presented here provide an accurate and reliable reflection of district-wide staff perspectives at this stage. The summary is organized around 3 guiding priorities. 1, improving outcomes for students. Commonly identified strengths. Grade banding, meaning all students in the district of a grade in the same building, most notably pre-K 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, seen as major academic and developmental improvement. Staff across multiple groups agreed that grade banding could improve educational outcomes by grouping students developmentally and allowing teachers to specialize in fewer grade levels. This structure was seen as fostering stronger collaboration, targeted instruction, and more consistent curriculum alignment district-wide. A dedicated middle school, 6 through 8. Many felt that creating a true middle school model would support age-appropriate learning, SEL development, and extracurricular opportunities. 6th graders in particular were viewed as ready for middle-level learning and teaming, which is limited under the current structure. Equity and access. Consolidation or grade banding could help ensure equal access to specialized programs, interventions, and services. For example, MTSS, special education and counseling, which are harder to provide in small, isolated schools. Larger student cohorts were seen as beneficial for peer diversity, group flexibility, and reduced stigma around interventions or specialized supports. Key concerns: too many transitions. Models requiring multiple moves, for example, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, were viewed as harmful to student stability and relationships with trusted adults. Many emphasize that continuity and a sense of belonging are especially important for struggling learners and younger children. Developmental mismatches. The idea of fifth graders being in a 512 building as an option 5.6 was strongly criticized as developmentally inappropriate, exposing younger students to older social influences and eliminating play and age-appropriate recess. Loss of community connection. Many staff worried that closing community schools would harm student identity, social emotional safety, and family engagement. Small-town relationships and intergenerational ties, volunteers, mentorships, local pride, were described as integral to student well-being. Transportation barriers. Long bus rides were repeatedly cited as a significant obstacle to attendance, student readiness, and equitable participation, especially for Starksboro and New Haven students in more centralized models. K-8 schools. While staff recognize there is benefit to the K-8 schools and that this option would keep schools open, most felt this option was not best for students. Summary. Staff broadly agreed that grade banding and a true middle school structure could improve learning outcomes, promote consistency, and strengthen supports for all students. But they warned that multiple transitions, inequitable access, and community detachment could negate those benefits if not carefully managed. Priority 2, improving the teaching and working experience for staff, commonly identified strengths. Collaboration and professional support. Nearly every group highlighted how grade banding would enable true professional learning communities, giving teachers grade level partners to share planning, interventions, and instructional strategies. Specialization and sustainability. Teachers saw potential for reduced workload and burnout, since focusing on fewer grades allows deeper expertise and more targeted planning. Staff noted that multi-age classrooms, common in smaller schools, are unsustainable long-term. Improved alignment and equity in resources. Shared staffing models could ensure equitable access to specialists, interventionists, and nurses, reducing reliance on shared itinerant staff and filling coverage gaps that hurt both educators and students. Key concerns: staff reductions and reassignments. The most consistent concern across all feedback was the scale of projected staff cuts, especially under options F and I.6. Teachers feared that these reductions would increase workloads, limit student support, and undermine morale. Licensure and staffing logistics. Many staff pointed out the potential problems with licensure requirements, K6 versus 5.9 certifications, and worried about being asked to teach outside their endorsed range. Questions about how reassignments would occur and who decides placements were repeated across multiple groups. Loss of school identity and culture. Staff expressed deep emotional attachment to their schools and communities. The potential closures were described as grieving experiences that would cause loss of morale and a feeling of being othered if reassigned to new buildings. Transparency and inclusion. Many felt the process was too top-down. Staff requested clear information about financial data, administrative costs, and the rationale behind specific options. Several expressed frustration that teacher feedback had not been visibly integrated into the ongoing planning process. Summary. Staff are optimistic about opportunities for collaboration and professional growth through grade-aligned teaching, but significant anxiety about job loss, communication gaps, and morale dominated the feedback. Staff urged for transparent, inclusive planning to maintain trust and engagement. And then priority 3, financial efficiency. Recognize strengths, acknowledgement of fiscal necessity. Almost all groups agreed that maintaining the status quo, option 8.1, is financially unsustainable, and that taking control of reconfiguration decisions is preferable to state mandated changes. Central office relocation. There was near unanimous support for moving the central office into a district-owned building such as Mount Abe to eliminate rental costs. This was viewed as a clear, low-impact way to achieve savings. Consolidation for efficiency. Staff acknowledged that merging schools and grade bands could reduce redundancy in facilities and staffing, resulting in long-term financial stability. Options E, F, and I.6 were viewed as meeting or exceeding financial targets, though I.6 carried the most significant social costs. Key concerns: accuracy and transparency of financial data. Many participants questioned the completeness and fairness of cost analyses, especially regarding transportation, construction, and administrative expenses. There was frustration that teacher cuts were itemized while central office or administrative cuts were not clearly detailed. Hidden costs. Staff warned that projected savings may not materialize once transportation, ADA compliance, cafeteria expansion, and construction overruns are factored in. Several describe these estimates as unrealistic or optimistic. Community and political realities. Many doubted that towns would vote to close their schools, suggesting that the most financially efficient options may also be politically infeasible. Staff worried that forcing closures could backfire, reducing community trust and voter support for future budgets. Summary, staff supported the need for financial reform and appreciated cost savings ideas like central office relocation. However, they warned against short-term savings that sacrifice long-term educational or community stability, calling for greater transparency and holistic cost-benefit analyses. In essence, Advisory Council reflection to the board. The MASD Advisory Council recognized that across sources, the prevailing tone of feedback was marked by grief, apprehension, and concern. Overall, staff perceptions reflected a sense that potential risks and losses outweighed perceived benefits of proposed changes at this time. At the same time, many participants expressed a desire to come together proactively to regain local control, strengthen shared purpose, and position the district to navigate state-level challenges as a unified community. Staff across MASD expressed clear support for grade banding and a dedicated middle school model as the most educationally sound path forward, offering equity, consistency, and collaboration. However, they caution that implementation must protect relationships, transparency, and community trust, and that financial efficiency cannot outweigh the district's core mission of equitable, high-quality learning for all students. And these were the asterisks that were up above. Respondents in the individualized survey data represent a wide range of roles across the district, including principals, assistant principals, athletic directors, curriculum coordinators, SEL and equity coordinators, instructional coaches, literacy and math interventionists, multilingual learner specialists, school counselors, speech language pathologists, nurses, early ed lead teachers, kindergarten through sixth grade classroom teachers, including STEM and combined grades, middle and high school teachers, English, math, science, social studies, financial literacy, French, Spanish, and health, special educators, behavior assistants, educational assistants, including pre-K, art and visual arts educators, music educators, physical education teachers and coaches, library media specialists and librarians, ELP coordinators, administrative assistants, and long-term substitute teachers. A note on summary preparation. The summary was prepared by the MASD advisory team with support from an AI-assisted writing tool to enhance clarity and organization. All interpretations and conclusions reflect the advisory team's analysis of staff input and district data. Stop sharing screen. Questions?
So hearing all that. Do we have questions for the educators in the room? About their thoughts or how they see education delivery? Any questions about anything? Yeah, Nancy.
Yeah, my question is, what other cost saving ideas? Like those presented in the Levinson report and other, besides education delivery models. What other cost saving approaches, strategies did the group was to explore in depth? Besides the education delivery models on the list.
I'll throw that question out to you all who did the work in the advisory council, if that's appropriate. Because you're all the ones doing it. Any other cost savings looked at besides educational delivery models?
Like, I would guess one of them might be, the model has been to sister schools or.
Are you on the advisory council?
Well, I'm trying to, because I'm seeing just some thinking, so I'm saying, maybe elaborating a little bit on what. Right, what those other options were, right, like, so the sister school model. Or shared staffing or more staffing doing more things, right? So like those sort of
Different
things.
options for professional development, for people wearing multiple hats.
Multiple hat where.
Maybe, okay, actually, go ahead.
That wasn't our task.
Who is the, are you on the advisory committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, so-
Advisory committee, I'm a Starkville taxpayer and I'm first grader.
Yeah, there we go.
And so you're saying that wasn't your
I think,
task?
I think what, Nancy's talking about there, you know, so there's been some other documents that we probably won't have.
Oh, I thought.
We've seen the lemon.
I've seen more financial
Yeah,
statements
so-
than I've ever
so-
been to see.
So I think that.
Well, I've read this, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, good, so,
Our task last year, we were asked to explore educational delivery models. That was the parameters.
I see.
And so that was how we framed our work during our time together.
Thank you so much. As I recall, during the last budgeting process, teachers did come to us. We did put out the question to faculty and staff and say, where do you think we could cut? And they came back with a couple of recommendations. One was to fully ask parents to fund ELP. And I'm not sure I don't remember what the other ones were, but there were just a couple of them that were suggested. So my question was about what this advisory group really was working on. That was my question.
Their charge, yeah.
Can I add something?
Please, yep.
I'm Sarah Audie. I was also on the advisory council. We did look at the Levinson report and used a lot of information from that in order to inform our decisions about how many people we put at each school when we were looking at the banding models and that kind of thing. So it was not disregarded by any means.
But it was in relation to the education delivery, the list of education delivery models.
It was, we were looking at how we could adjust staffing and we kind of just evolved into, well, what could we do? And we ended up with those 16 different scenarios.
Yeah.
yeah, I have a question. That is a real contentious issue, obviously, and a lot of the educational issues, it seems, there are differences of opinions about this stuff. I've seen some research that talks about how closing a school and a smaller elementary school can particularly impact folks from lower income households. Or special ed. I mean, I saw a study that talked about that. I think it was from North Carolina where they had like consolidations. And I'm wondering, you know, whether you took that sort of stuff into account when you were trying to think about, and actually, I think the summary is pretty good. Because I think it speaks to some of that stuff. It talks about, you know, needing to have a holistic kind of cost benefit analysis that doesn't just look at the, you know, the money, but also you know, some of these equity concerns. So, but do you have any thoughts about that sort of stuff?
I can speak to this. So I'm a special educator at Boone Elementary School, and I'm on the advisory council. And one of the considerations that was discussed, especially in terms of supporting students with disabilities, is that our current arrangement means that I am a math interventionist, an SEL interventionist, and a special educator for one population. And our small school models necessitate that. And I don't have other special educators to collaborate with, and so some of the drivers into thinking about that was around the opportunities that it opens up for professional development for special educators and specialization for interventionists versus special educators where we're not serving it. So there are considerations in that regard, to like the experience of that in a small school.
Okay, thanks.
Meredith?
Hi, I just want to send an absolute level of gratitude to our amazing staff for putting this together. I'm going to talk about this when I give my presentation in a couple of minutes here, but something that I've heard overwhelmingly in the survey that I sent, that the community engagement committee sent out, is just a deep level of community love and appreciation for the staff. So I want to make sure that that is felt by the advisory council today. That's really it. So thank you for putting this together.
Now's the time. Yeah, go ahead, Dave, go ahead, and then Karen.
So, I wanna, agree with that and express, gratitude for the effort that the district has put in to produce that, look at educationally, what do we need to do? Because after all, that is what we're about, right? And once again, I think about what problem are we trying to solve? The Campaign for Vermont came out with a document a couple of months ago, talking about how we have done really, we have slipped dramatically in NAEP test scores in, across the state. And there's a lot of people to blame. You can blame Act 46, some do COVID and, I recently read, just today, actually, an article from the Boston Globe that says this is not isolated to Vermont. This is a Northeast New England problem. And you have difficulty comparing that or supporting that when the Globe looked at the NAEP results from Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, 3 of the lowest achieving states in the country, and how throughout their educational challenges of COVID and whatnot, they have increased their NAEP scores. They are above the national average for the first time, maybe ever. At the same time that we in the Northeast are struggling. So I wonder if this was part of the consideration by the advisory council of does banding or whatever solutions were suggested, are they going to address NAEP scores and how we once again become, you know, a leader in the nation? Vermont has been a leader in the nation educationally. And the other problem that I think we're facing in Vermont is that we have identified a much higher percentage of our students for special ed than other states. And so does this banding or other thoughts that come out of this report designed to address that issue of how we deliver education to students who maybe shouldn't be labeled as special ed and given an IEP, yet they must be given educational opportunity that they're not currently getting. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to reiterate a question that I think that Nancy asked. I don't know if I've heard addressed first. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all being here. We all have things that we could be doing today, and we care about our schools. We care about equity, inclusion, accessibility, education. That's a commitment we're all making just by being here today. I want to say that we have an opportunity to create something really cool, something new, something we haven't done before, and to draw people to this area. We don't have to be thinking about shuttering schools. We can be creating something empowering, energizing, that brings people to this part of Vermont. It's something that Vermont's trying to address, bringing families to Vermont, bringing the workers to Vermont. We are in a reasonable commute zone to Burlington, Colchester, Williston, Montpelier. We could be a driving force in repopulating this part of the state. There's been significant subdivision applications in Starksboro, in Moncton. This doesn't have to be a death knell for our county. We can think of this as an opportunity. And I would like us to be creative, not looking at what we can cut, but what we can do collaboratively to come together to reduce costs, to continue to offer equitable, awesome educational opportunities, to utilize outside classrooms instead of building bigger schools that have maintenance issues. I would like to think about what we can cut in our costs and how we can do it creatively, because we can really draw people here and see the beauty of this place and this community, and the small town schools are doing that in their own little ways. But if we can magnify that by emulating it across the different towns and and using the strength of what we're doing in each of those schools to build each other up and work together, I think we can do something really special here. And I think that we have the opportunity by looking at other ways of cutting costs, not just by delivery of education models. I think there are other ways that we can cut costs that we really need to look at that will energize our community. Thank you.
Go ahead. When we talked about when you guys all talked about the education delivery system, you talked about banding grade levels as the educational delivery system, but can we look at it from another perspective? Burlington, for example, has an arts academy in one building, a sustainable academy in another building. I don't know if they have any others. I've been out of that picture for a long time. But we have that ability right here in our town. If we wanted to shuffle kids around as we've been talking, why can't we come up with interesting and educational, high quality work in these different areas that are up and coming? Sustainability is huge in our future. The arts in Vermont are huge. They're a large portion of the GDP or whatever it's called. And there are probably other kinds of, one could be a more traditional school, for example. And people would have options that way. So I guess what I'm saying, it doesn't have to be those particular things, but just that instead of thinking only in terms of grades and banding grades, how about getting students who are interested or families who are more interested in one of these kinds of areas to be able to go to that school and get a good education?
Thank you. Meredith, is that a second hand?
Yeah, just really quick, I want to circle back to something that the District Advisory Council put in their report about professional learning committees. I'm a former teacher and know deeply the positive impact that PLCs had on me and my ability to teach. But for people that might not be as familiar with the PLC model, I would love to hear more about why PLCs are important and how the Advisory Council sees the benefits of PLCs playing out for students in a grade banded model.
What are those initials?
Professional learning community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Teachers in the room?
I have a question for the advisory council.
Yeah, if we could maybe see if they answer Meredith first and then.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, PLCs, its importance, right? That was the question.
Yep.
Meredith Rothignol, great last name.
Yeah, right.
Okay, look at it this way, right? It is difficult if a kindergarten teacher is the only kindergarten teacher in a school. She has no one to collaborate with. She has no one to bounce ideas off of. Working within a cohort becomes really difficult. The options currently are, you could maybe meet outside of school hours. That's difficult. You maybe can hustle over to a school before, 4:15 on a Wednesday to do it, right? Everything's kind of difficult in that scenario. Sometimes there's options on our early release days on once a month to get together, right? Usually that is K2. It's not just kindergartners the whole time. There is some kindergarten time, but it's not as valuable as meeting daily. And so one of the ideas is if you can get multiple of the same grade level teachers together, their professional learning community grows from 1 to 6, 4, whatever. And they can collaborate daily, they can coordinate lessons, they can coordinate assessments, they can work together, solve problems together. They're able to probably produce some greater learning efficiency through that model versus working solo most of the time.
Can I also add the benefits to children when teachers have the chance to collaborate and talk about best practices and really see what's working and what's efficient and really moving kids? And that is also a hugely missed opportunity when you're the only person teaching your grade in a building. Kids lose out too.
Can I add to that? I'm Amy Mayer. I work at Bristol as a reading interventionist, and I'm new to the advisory council this year, so I don't have the depth of understanding that most of these people do, but I was gonna try to answer Dave's question about, how are we trying to improve academic outcomes? And this is one way, as an interventionist, now I'm spread across K-6 in the school that I work in. If it was perhaps, K2, then I would be really focused in on a much smaller band of students and really providing that early intervention along with probably a math interventionist and maybe another, interventionist that worked in some other area. Not sure what that would look like, but that's I think the hope with this, us looking at different scenarios. They don't all have that. Right, the grade banding is probably the ones that would provide that hope that we would improving academic outcomes because we could really focus in on specific groups, utilize our skills, collaborate, have these PLCs with other interventionists in their grade.
Kathy, you had a question?
One question that I've always had in looking at all of these options is, would you not also have the same increased communities of practice with multiple age groups in fewer but larger schools? I mean, I've always taught in multi-age classrooms, and never once did I ever teach a second grade that was a straight second grade. I had some kids that were on the fourth grade spectrum. I had some kids that were kindergarten spectrum. And those are the people that I reached out to, that you would not have access to if you were in a banded school. So my question to the advisory committee is, would you not gain the same communities of practice if you had fewer schools that were integrated to like K-5? But there were larger numbers of teachers and larger numbers of students in those facilities.
So I think there's a little bit of a distinction between.
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you. If you could stand up.
A distinction between, yes, you would still gain there are multiple classrooms of a particular grade level, which would contribute to that collaboration. I do think there are certain developmental differences that you wouldn't be able to specialize in the same way, which is more, I think of more as in the social emotional development. That there's really different social skills that students are working on at different grade bands, and there's a benefit there in how we wrap around students.
And can I add on to the multi-age piece? I think the multi-age comment that came through from our staff came specifically from schools that have been asked to reconfigure how they organize their grades almost every year for that years.
Hold on, buddy.
I happen to teach at a school that does have 2 report classes, and so we do not end up reorganizing. We have multiple multi-age grades all the way K-6. However, 2 of our other schools have reconfigured over the past couple of years, almost every year, having a K1, having a 2-3, having 3-4, having 5-6. And so the multi-age being unsustainable comment came through in that teachers are being asked to not just do multi-age, but do a different multi-age grade band frequently.
I have one hand up and then I'll come to you. Miss Davis on the screen.
Hi, yeah, I'm Miss Davis. I'm from the 2nd grade at BES, and I just have a couple things to chime in on. One being very sorry, apparently you heard my son in the background looking for me. So I'm sorry my microphone was on. 2, I am a full second grade, and I also get to teach with another person who is great. And there's so many benefits of it. You get to bounce ideas off of each other, you get to compare assessments, you get to scaffold, you get to mix groups. I've also had the ability to teach a 1-2 before, and it was super hard to become specialized in the grade that you're in. So having a 1-2 or a 3-4, you constantly have to change your um, ability to teach based off of the age. You have to scaffold the way that you teach because of, the different topics that you're teaching. Somebody who's on a lower scale of, say, a first grade and then a higher scale of a second grade, you wouldn't teach the same thing, which causes teachers to have to constantly, plan extra and do the extra thing, go above and beyond. So I think it's to say something that having grade banding with 4 or 5 teachers that teach second grade, like how awesome would that be for somebody to be specialized in that grade particularly? And to go off that as well, grade banding, you often are with the grade below and the grade above you. You can kind of help children see where they're coming from and also see where they need to go. And that can cause a really great sense of community for children.
Dave?
Just a short question. It has have schools that have grade banding in Vermont or elsewhere in New England been able to raise their NAEP scores? Has that been an effective tool to use or not?
Dave, NAEP scores are really hard to see at the school level.
Something else that I want to add about placing a lot of emphasis on a score that measures how a student performed on that one single occurrence. I feel like it isn't the best way to look at things. Yes, it's a good way to report out whether kids are growing or not, but sometimes I've seen particularly kids take these standardized tests, and it often becomes a reflection of their dog died that morning or something crazy like that. It doesn't always reflect their ability. I feel like placing so much emphasis on a NAEP score probably is not the best idea.
Yeah, I'll add, like a lot of factors go into your NAEP scores, like the top performing school in Vermont every single year is Marion Cross Elementary School in Norwich, Vermont. They might be the top elementary school in America. I mean, their scores are incredible. They're large, they probably have 200 to 300 kids, but what they have going for them is all their parents either work at Dartmouth College or work at Dartmouth Hitchcock Hospital. And so they're a very, very high SES school. And all their parents have master's degrees and they have everything. I mean, like, will PLCs help teachers, will being able to collaborate with peers who are teaching the same thing as you help you teach better lessons? Like, of course it will. It has to. Like, it is just more collaboration amongst themselves. When you have more people with more ideas, you're gonna probably get some better ideas out of that. And I think if you did a deep dive in the top schools in the state, you will find that they're on the larger side. Orchard School, as an example, which was a high performing school in Chittenden County, is a large school. And one of the advantages of that is there's multiple people in the grade level who can teach together. It is very hard to be a singleton. It is very hard to come up with ideas when you're stuck. If you have no one to collaborate with, that's tough. And it's a lot easier for people to bounce ideas off of back and forth.
Erin Hopper.
Yes, hi there. I'm a 6th grade teacher at Bristol. I was a 6th grade teacher at Robinson last year, and before that I worked in Essex Junction for a long time in a school that was grade banded, a 4-5 school. And I can just say that just to reiterate, PLCs are really beneficial. In Essex, we were able to meet every week. We were looking at student work. We were figuring out, bouncing ideas off each other in terms of, this isn't working for me, what are you doing? So the collaborative piece is really huge. And I also just wanted to say, I have children in the district. Teaching at Robinson last year was great, but I was the only teacher, the only sixth grade teacher doing all of the subjects. And even the most like qualified, experienced teachers, it's just so difficult to do your best for the kids across so many disciplines every day. And now being at Bristol this year, I'm departmentalized and doing math and science to two sets of sixth grades. And I can already say that in terms of my, like, with my best efforts last year compared to this year, the kids are getting better math instruction from me this year because I have the time to focus in on just math and science. And so they're getting the best instruction that I can provide on that content, and they're getting the best humanities instruction from my partner teacher. So it's just a not, I was the same teacher in two spaces last year, trying my best, but I can confidently say I feel that the kids this year are just getting a better math education experience because I have the bandwidth and the time to be able to dedicate like a focus in that area. So I just wanted to share that it's definitely, I think it's just not an equitable educational experience to ask one teacher to be doing all of the subjects. You're just not able to do it in as great a depth as you can if you're specialized. So that's it. Thank you.
I'm gonna take one more and then I'm gonna try to close out this section to move on to the next one, okay?
I'm Heather Cosgrove. I'm a special education teacher at Moncton, previously at Beeman. I've been in the district. It's my 26th year. New to the advisory council this year, but talking about grade banding and thinking as you're asking me about test scores and stuff, grade banding, and if we had, and it could be a K-5. I'm not like set on like it has to be a pre-K3, but looking at kind of consolidating a little bit. Currently in my job, I'm a special educator K6, so I've worked with all children on IEPs K6, focusing on math and also literacy interventionist. So if we look at how to support all our children in our schools, we give multiple tiered systems. We call it multi-tiered system of support. So some children need a little bit of extra help in the classroom. Some need a little more help by a teacher in a small group, and then some need more help from a special educator or interventionist. If I had more colleagues and we could make more of those intervention groups based on what the kids need, we could prevent some kids from needing an IEP because we could provide more support when we notice, oh, you are having trouble reading, I can give you more time, more support, and potentially get them closer to grade level, and potentially even a child with a reading disability may get that support and not be to the level of an IEP. So having colleagues that I could work with and having more people in, especially I think K2, where we need those basic skills, it could support us in a lot of ways for the kids.
I'm gonna give it 1 minute. So if we can squeeze the two people in a minute.
I'm just really curious if we looked at other ways that we can collaborate without shifting classrooms, shifting schools. I'm thinking about Heinsberg Elementary School. Every Wednesday they have off, so that teachers can collaborate and do professional development and team work in their planning.
Thank you. Liz?
Yeah, I'm just excited about this moment of having this information. So, one thing is rather sensitive to the idea about that we're taking the best care of our students in poverty and our students with special education needs. And if we could talk more about, I think that was really helpful to hear about how we can cover them more thoroughly with special education. But I also would like to hear more about the wraparound services that students that need more. And how we can do more for them when they need wraparound services like after school programming, breakfasts. I'm not in there, so I don't know what principals try to accomplish in order to wrap around their students, but are there ways that could vary among the models that we have? Thank you.
So I'm gonna move on from this All right,
Go ahead.
You folks are talking about collaborating, you know, and we've got 4 elementary schools, so. Say we had 4 6th grade, we're not gonna have 4 teachers for 6th graders, are we? Some of those teachers are gonna go away. We don't need the 4 teachers in the 4 individual schools, you don't need 4 teachers when they're all together. So wouldn't there be less people to collaborate with, because some of those folks would be thinking work at different places.
Okay.
No problem.
No, you see, okay, go
I know you're waiting for one more. It's been, we don't want to get too much in the weeds, but nobody's talked about coaches, and often they're brought about as, you know, who are they and what the heck do they do, and nobody uses them. That may be the case. I looked at the budget stuff, and if you cut the coaches out, you save $700,000. That's like a third of what you're looking to save of 2.3 million. It seems to me that that's something that really needs to be looked at. I'm a strong proponent of the coaching model and have some experience historically, 20 years ago. They're great, but only if they're used in a context where there are also aides in classrooms and there's time provided to work with the coach and so on. And so I hope there's some consideration to either doing something differently with coaches that really helps, or saving a whole bunch of money by getting rid of them. And I'm talking about academic coaches for reading and math and power math. I think there's 4 or 5 of them.
Thank you. Okay, now though, I'm not gonna look over here. I am gonna move on to the next thing, which is discussing our community engagement committee survey that we put out. Meredith, are you feeling prepared?
Heck yeah, I am. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, you.
We needed to give you permissions on that. Let me just.
Can you expand this speaker view?
Yep.
Oh, gosh. That's not the slide I want to be on, so give me a second. Can everybody see my screen?
We can,
Yeah.
yep. We're just gonna
All
make the
right.
screen, hold on one second.
Okay.
If we can.
And she's sharing, so she would have to do it her end.
Is
What
there
am I
like
doing?
is there like a presentation mode you could enter that makes this?
Was it not in presentation mode?
It is showing, we just wonder if it gets bigger.
I think if you pin the speaker so that we're not seeing all the people present on the Zoom. That's
Okay.
Great online.
Go ahead.
You want me to share again? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. And now, since I clicked, I've got to go back, so give me a second. All right. How are we doing?
We're okay.
Yeah.
All right. Greetings, everybody from the Dominican Republic. My name is Meredith. I am currently on vacation with my family, and truly there is no place I would rather be right now than in Bristol talking to all of you. That's not a joke. I really mean that. I am sad that I couldn't be here with all of you in person today. We, as a community engagement committee, drafted a survey in September, which we then brought to the board for feedback. We had an additional meeting on September 26th to release this survey with the goal of enhancing our discussion today with the community voice. And I have to take a second today to shout out Liz, Kristen, and Barb. If you look at what we did for data gathering, it was so comprehensive. Jennifer Bauer as well was an integral piece of this. So we posted multiple times on Facebook. We posted across all the front porch forums. We sent out an email to every single family in the district. We physically posted flyers with QR codes throughout our community. We made an alert on the website, and Marin Howell was very kind to allow us to post in the Addison Independent as well last week. And because of this, we got 592 responses, which floored me. I read every single one. I was patiently sitting at my computer watching them come in, and I feel so privileged and lucky that I get to be the steward and shepherd of this community information to you all today. Some disclaimers. As much fun as I have playing around with spreadsheets, I am not a statistician, and to my knowledge, Liz, Kristen, and Barb are not statisticians either. So because of that, the best way to look at this survey is a snapshot of community voice, not as some great statistical achievement. We also prioritize anonymity over data accuracy, and this is something that we felt really strongly on as a community. We wanted our community members to be honest with us and to give their true, honest feedback without fearing repercussions. So keep that in mind as you're looking at this data as well. There are also some respondents that aren't from our 4 towns, such as staff members or family members in Lincoln. We'll show you both sets of data, but wanted to let you know that as a disclaimer as well. And then finally, this is not the end all be all of community voice. So when we look at data like this, sometimes it can be tempting to make conclusions that just aren't there. So for example, if you look at this survey and come away with 90% of Bristol residents support closing elementary schools, that's not what this survey is saying. Think of this as a snapshot in time of community feedback. Thumbs up, we good so far?
Yep.
Cool. So let's get into it. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second and actually pull up the survey because I think it's helpful to see. And my apologies, I am used to presenting at home with multiple screens. So thank you as I figure this out. And I think it's really important to call out that the Community Engagement Committee was very intentional about being as open and honest and direct as possible about the fact that the options we're looking at involve closing elementary schools. So huge shout out to Kristen for drafting this preamble for us. You can see that we've bolded separate from discussions happening at the state level. We've bolded significant tax increases, and we've also bolded that most of the information involves closing 2 elementary schools. So we were really upfront with the community about the option, about what we're trying to do. So what we asked, what town do you live in? Are you a caregiver? Are you an employee? If you are an employee, do you live in one of our 4 towns? And then the big question here was, when considering a new school delivery system, what do you believe should be the top priorities? Select up to 3. So all survey respondents selected maximum 3 out of these 7 choices, which are providing high quality education for all students. Let me pause for a second. Should I make this bigger, or can you all see my screen okay?
Bigger, bigger, bigger.
Bigger. Thank you. Give me a sec. Okay. So providing high quality education for all students, keeping all elementary schools open, minimizing tax burden on residents, maintaining or improving student opportunities, supporting teachers and staff with adequate resources, long-term financial sustainability of the district, and preserving community identity and traditions. What information would you like MAUSD to bring in your community? We left that as an optional long answer text, as well as what suggestions do you have to improve the delivery of education in our district? We left that as long answer optional as well. And 40% of respondents actually took the time to fill out these optional narrative responses, which indicates to me that people in our community truly care about our kids and how we're delivering education, and there were lots of great ideas. So let me pause for a second. What questions do you all have on the survey before we get into the data? And as you're drafting your questions, I'm going to stop sharing so I can bring the presentation up again.
I don't see any hands up, Meredith.
Great.
One hand. I lied to you.
Yes, let's hear it.
Given the number of responses and the number of possible responses, do you feel that the survey can enable the superintendent and the board to draw any conclusions?
I think that was Nancy. I think I recognize that voice. Nancy, that is a great question. Yes, absolutely. Do think that this survey can enable the board to draw conclusions. I think the most impactful way to use this survey is to synthesize the information of what our communities are telling us and use that to enrich and enliven our discussions. That was such a good question. Yes, Tirza.
You kind of indicated you might look into things further, but 549 is great, and I think that's a really great number. But I spoke to at least 2 different parents at a soccer game tonight that had no idea about this survey or what I was talking about. So I'm hopeful that there's going to be much, much more community involvement, because as of now, it feels like things just like the last time this happened. Things feel like they've been snuck under the community a bit. And I was just so thankful something like this came out to really put it out there. But what I'm hearing from many community members is they had no idea and still don't. And so I am going to go update all those people after this meeting. Thank you for having this meeting, and thank you for having the Zoom. I forgot to mention that earlier. I know it's preferred to be in person, but many of us needed this Zoom option. So thank you.
Myself included. And absolutely, our work here is not done. This is step 1 of a long process of bringing the community into our discussions. So survey was a great first step, but by no means should we take this as our work here is done when it comes to involving our community in this decision-making process. So let's get into the good stuff. Looking at our data analysis and the number of respondents by town, there were 592 total respondents. There were 233 from Bristol, which is almost 10% of our population, which I just thought was incredible. 113 responses from Moncton, 101 from New Haven, and 102 from Starksboro. Slightly more than half of all respondents were caregivers to a child attending school in our district. And I thought this was so cool. 89 of our staff members responded to this survey as well. So we have a really solid staff voice when looking at the data. So let's start by looking at all responses. And I'm moving my Zoom around. Aaron, Patrick, Liz, I can see you all on my screen right now. Is my Zoom covering up what you're seeing on your end, or can you see this full slide?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So when we look at all respondents, I've highlighted the top 3 across the entire survey. Number 1, I think it was it Susan who called this out in public comment, providing a high quality education for our students across the board, not just in all responses, but in every single town and every single subgroup. This was number 1 across the board. Supporting teachers and staff with adequate resources was the number 2 response, which just speaks to the incredible quality of educators we have in our district and how deeply and passionately our community believes in them. And our community also really cares about maintaining or improving student opportunities. So we really like the opportunities that we're able to offer our students here and want to be able to continue to do so. I think it's also helpful to look at the percentage of respondents for each questions as well. Interestingly, when you look across the entirety of respondents, only 21% of respondents ranked keeping all elementary schools open in their top 3. And I want to be very careful. This does not mean that 80% of people in our 4 towns would vote yes on closing their town school. But it does indicate that when we're looking at how our community is prioritizing what they want the future of our district to look like, only about 20% are putting keeping all elementary schools open in their top 3. And when we narrow this down to our 4 towns, the numbers are almost exactly the same. So same top 3, and all percentages are within a point. I'm now going to, yes.
Oh, sorry. Just one comment from Herb, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks very much, for doing this. It's a lot of work, isn't it? So, I'm looking at these priorities and it sort of seems like a ranking that's kind of either or. Whereas, I bet a lot of folks don't think that some of these things are mutually exclusive, right? So, you might have people who really think that elementary schools have some value, but they also want to provide quality education for all the students, who could, of course. So I'm wondering if there's any way that you ask the question that would sort of differentiate, so that's not just an either or kind of thing, yeah, because the implication seems to be, well, people don't really think keeping elementary schools is very important, but I'm just not sure that whether the survey is all that helpful in saying that, Meredith.
Yeah, I'm not sure it is either, Herb. I think that's going to be up for us as a board to decide. The problem with data is that we have the data that we have, and we can make the conclusions we want to make with the data that we have. So I think that's a great point to call out, and I appreciate your insight. I see a hand up from Dave.
Hi, this is actually Jamie Deacon. So, Meredith.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. One of the questions I had about the data is given that Bristol has a larger population, there were more respondents, their school isn't on the docket to potentially be closed, so that would definitely skew the data. And so obviously we're going to have a low percentage overall of respondents who are saying, I'm not worried about schools closing or I'm not prioritizing that because that isn't something that they actually have to be concerned about. And I'm wondering if the data was actually split by town so we could see how the different towns responded versus grouping them all together.
Jamie, you have perfectly teed me up for my next slide. So, Erin, if it's okay, can I go into looking at the data by town?
Yes, please.
All right. So I went in alphabetical order for the next towns, for the town slide. So it's going to be Bristol, then Moncton, then New Haven, then Starksboro. And I just wanted to call that out because I live in Bristol and didn't want anybody to think that I'm favoring Bristol by putting them first. So when we look at Bristol, you can see that Bristol, just as Jamie said a second ago, really did not prioritize keeping elementary schools open at all in their responses to the survey. Only 22 out of 237 respondents ranked keeping all elementary schools open in their top 3. They rated providing high quality education for all students, number 1, just like everybody else did. And then minimizing tax burden on residents, maintaining or improving student opportunities, and supporting teachers and staff with adequate resources. We can think of them as tied just based with the number of respondents that we have, with a slight preference for maintaining or improving student opportunities. And you can see the percentages here. So more or less in line with all respondents, just with extra weight given to specifically minimizing tax burden on residents and keeping all elementary schools open. Looking at Moncton, they actually looked pretty similar to the responses we got from our 4 towns at large. Their response to keeping all elementary schools open was 20.35%, which is essentially the same as the percentage of all the respondents that, I'm getting tongue-tied. Let me pause. Moncton looks very similar to what we saw a couple of slides ago when we look at the data from all respondents. Their top 3 were providing high quality education for all students, supporting teachers and staff with adequate resources, maintaining or improving student opportunities. And when we look at keeping all elementary schools open, this was number 6 out of 7 in their priorities, and about 20% ranked this in their top 3, which is very similar to what we saw when we look at the survey as a whole. New Haven looked almost exactly the same as Moncton, which was interesting because we're going to talk about the narrative responses in a second. And the residents of New Haven are, at least the survey respondents, are very aware that Beeman is one of the schools that, if schools are closed, at least residents of New Haven seem to think that Beeman is going to be one of those schools. So providing high quality education for all students, supporting teachers and staff with adequate resources, and maintaining or improving student opportunities were in the top three. And when looking at keeping all elementary schools open, 15.84% of respondents ranked that in their top three. I have two more slides. I'm going to look at Starksboro, and then we're going to look at a table comparing all four towns, and then I'm going to stop for questions. So thank you for bearing with me as I go through all these data heavy slides. Starksboro is where things get really interesting. So Starksboro deviates from the survey at whole by putting keeping all elementary schools open in their top three. So Starksboro's top three were providing high quality education for all students, keeping all elementary schools open, and supporting teachers and staff with adequate resources. They also ranked preserving community identity and traditions higher than any of the other towns. So when we look at the question of keeping all elementary schools open, based on the survey responses we have, it appears that this is much more important to the residents of Starksboro than it is to residents in our other three towns. And then pausing here, I've highlighted the top three from each town, and I actually thought this was really exciting because really our towns feel pretty similarly, with the exception of Starksboro wanting to prioritize keeping all elementary schools open over maintaining or improving student opportunities. So I just threw a lot of data at you all. Let's pause, take a second, reflect, and I would love to hear thoughts, reflections, and questions on everyone's minds.
I saw this hand first.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Meredith. I'm wondering if on the keeping, sort of decisions about the wording, keeping all elementary schools open, I don't think a person from one town necessarily would advocate strongly for keeping another town school open. So did you consider keeping the school in my town open as a question?
Oh, that's interesting.
That's a really good point. I think the narrative responses shed some additional light on how residents in each town feel about keeping their elementary school open. But I think also now is a great time to point out that I'm not a statistician and completely agree and own all flaws in the wording of this survey, and think your wording probably would have better served the survey than what we have here.
As a Starksboro resident, I'm not really surprised to see that Starksboro is really standing for our school. 3 years ago, we had a unanimous vote to keep our school open, and was voted down by 2 individual votes in New Haven for Legionary District. So I think, we're happy to be a part of the district, but we care about our school. It's the lifeblood of our community. And I think that you look at the people in the room here, we stand by the Starksboro Elementary School as being a core part of our community and our identity. And so I'm happy that there's maybe a sense of unity across the district, but please include Starksboro in your plans, because we want there to be a sense of unity across town lines and support for each other's schools.
Absolutely. I think Jamie Deacon has her hand up on Zoom, right? Yep. Jamie, you are Dave, right?
No, this is this is actually Dave this time.
Hi, Dave.
Hello, how are you? I just wanted to point out that the variety of questions here makes it a little bit difficult to have to choose the just 3 of them. And the 3 that seem to be most chosen the most are ones that are really hard for anyone to say no to. It's like if you added the choice of like keeping our students safe, it's like everyone's going to choose that because that is like a no-brainer. Whereas like thinking about some of these other, just when you look at all the different variety of questions here, I think it's just important to think about how to compare apples and oranges, and that's what this is coming off as a little bit. But I do appreciate all the work, so thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And I appreciate the feedback. And that I think really gets at the core of the work that we've been doing as a board. How do we provide high quality education without cutting teachers, while also giving our students better education so that we can see increased NAEP scores and better serve our special education students without having an unmanageable tax burden, while also balancing the needs of our community and keeping schools open. So it's tough. And I feel that, and I think that's a great call out, Dave. Lisa.
I would like to second that comment because I found it really hard to answer these questions, because of course I want to improve student opportunities, and of course I want, I pretty much want all of those things. But because of my strength of feeling like the preschool, the school is core to the community, I had to put that as a priority. So again, I commend you for doing the survey, and I really appreciate it. But I found it really hard. I just want to second the last person's comments, because it was really hard to answer it, because they're all really important things.
Thank you, Lisa. Erin, are there questions in the room?
I don't see any, but do you have other results you wanted to go over?
Yes, I do. So I'm gonna keep going if that's okay. So we also split the data between caregiver and non-caregivers, and I've highlighted the three biggest discrepancy. So non-caregivers care more about minimizing the tax burden, whereas caregivers care a lot more about maintaining or improving student opportunities, and non-caregivers also care a lot more about the financial sustainability of the district in the long term. When looking at staff, staff care significantly less about keeping all elementary schools open than non-staff do. Whereas non-staff care a lot more about minimizing tax burden, and supporting teachers and staff with adequate resources is a much higher priority for staff than for non-staff. So looking specifically at the question of keeping all schools open, I'm going to go through a couple of slides looking at trends from our narrative responses, and I'm going to read some of these quotes out loud. I'm going to read word for word from the slide, because I think it's really important that everyone on the board feel the emotions that have gone into some of these responses. It was really enlightening for me as I was reading them, and I think it warrants taking a minute to go through them. So looking specifically at Starksboro, I just want to call out again that keeping all schools open was number 6 out of 7 priorities in all town, but Starksboro, where it's number 2. And I want to read some of the responses from Starksboro residents to you all, so you can understand what's at stake for the residents of Starksboro. Without our little school, we have nothing. Without our elementary schools, our town will be less attractive for families to move. Will closing schools really save taxpayers money? And small community schools are the heart of towns and education. If we are really focused on quality education and student outcomes, we need to find a way to preserve our community schools. I would be curious to see more data around student outcomes at our local elementary schools. There's also several questions about why we're making changes now instead of waiting for the state redistricting task force to make their recommendations. New Haven was, I think, just as interesting a case study as Starksboro, especially when you read the narrative responses. I think everyone should obviously read every single narrative response, but if you have time, read the responses from Starksboro and New Haven. Because I think it's really interesting to see that juxtaposition. So there were several very explicit and very strong narrative responses calling for the closing of Beeman or school consolidation. Here's some examples. So As a parent in one of our smallest schools, I would rather see Beeman closed than see the kids be deprived of opportunities and education due to lack of resources. Make high school your priority. This is what draws people to your community. Elementary schools are not the draw. Specific teachers are a draw. Stop putting the town needs over the kid and school needs. Consolidating elementary schools should be examined to eliminate multi-grade classrooms. The delivery of education in MAUSD is improved when we have high-quality learning opportunities with equitable support and services. We have the human capital, but they must have the resources. The human capital won't be sustainable with fewer resources just so we can keep every school open. The inequities exist. Simply look at class distributions and grade configurations by keeping all buildings open. Combine that with fewer staff and resources, and it is a disservice to our students in our communities. However, no town is a hegemony. So there are a few anti-consolidation narrative responses. There were, let me move you all on Zoom so I can find the exact number, but less than 10 narrative responses that said, please don't close Beeman. So I wanted to call that out too. Moncton voted pretty in line with the survey as a whole, and there were mixed narrative responses, some explicitly calling for school closure and some explicitly calling to not close schools. Here we have an example calling for the closure of Bristol Elementary. Another response saying the kids will be fine if we are fine. Consolidated efforts would allow for staff to be supported and to support more children. Something that actually came up a lot more in Moncton than any other town was school safety and wanting more resources to go to school safety. And then this last narrative response here, options that don't involve ripping the fabric of our community apart. So Moncton felt pretty split. And in the interest of time, because I know we are late in the day, Bristol, I don't think to anybody's surprise, was pretty pro consolidation. And there's some narrative responses in the slides and in the raw data that's linked on the agenda and in the meeting and in the minutes that you can see. Other narrative responses is that there's really high support for teachers and staff, but the coaching model seems to be pretty unpopular with our community. So there were lots of narrative responses either asking that we do away with it entirely or explain to them why we have it. So I think as we're looking at educational delivery models, it would be good for us as a board to determine how we feel about the coaching model. And if it's something that we strongly support, it needs some PR and we need to come back to the community with a response as to why we're keeping it. Same with central office and administration costs. The community feels really strongly that if there are cuts, we should look at central office, which I know we have this discussion every year. And I know we always come down to, we need to have a central office team to be legally in compliance. So if we as a board aren't going to make cuts at the central office level, I think that would also warrant some PR, or we decide we want to make cuts at the central office level. So just as the messenger, this is what our community is telling us. There was also lots of narrative responses that supported re-examining an Addison Northwest merger. I think now is a really interesting time to look at that. So my closing thoughts, we have a ton of information from our community. So what is our role as a board? What matters to our community and to our towns, and what's our role in combating misinformation that may be out there? And how do we want this data to inform our future planning? Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith.
Nice job, Meredith.
Thank you. Questions, thoughts, reactions, personal critiques?
Yeah. It's hard for me to see that.
I'd just like to point out, one thing that Karen started to say, Bristol apparently doesn't care if Robinson closes, neither does Moncton, neither does New Haven. But when Starksboro petitioned to leave the district, Bristol and Moncton overwhelmingly supported us leaving, supported Starksboro leaving. New Haven was, there was a lot of propaganda out there. They were told that their taxes were gonna go sky high if Starksboro left, so they managed to get the extra 2 votes that they needed to make it stay. But Moncton and Bristol have a feeling for us that we should have our school. And I'll bet if we voted again, the same way as we did back in 2022, we'd get the same results. So this survey saying that, Moncton and Bristol think we should close Robinson, I don't think that's accurate at all.
Yeah. So next on our agenda, we have some more information that we had asked our superintendent to gather for us as we were starting to dig through some options. And I know we also have individual board members who have other thoughts as we've tried to come up with creative ways to meet all the need. So we're gonna listen to that information. We're gonna hear some more ideas during that time too, and then we will move on from there.
So great deal of information requested and a great deal of information provided, linked in this document. This was in the warrant agenda, all the links there. So I don't know about going and go over every single linked document. Or we could take questions because it's been out for a while. What are your preferences?
Does the board feel comfortable with just doing questions based on what Patrick's provided? Okay. And if you, yeah, so it makes good sense to start with questions and then, we can sort of filter through other things.
Now?
Yes, now would be great.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Patrick, for that information. I know it, and Floyd, I know it probably wasn't easy. The reason why I thought that information was necessary is that I've been concerned that the district has looked at closing schools basically as the only option for addressing our financial situation. And I kind of think that that's the wrong approach. I think that we have some tough problems, coming up for fiscal year 27. I think it's probably not realistic to think that you can reap some savings, from closing schools. So I really think we need a 2-year process. And that 2-year process really has to look at what Nate Levinson talked about in terms of a cost-effective mindset. I mean, really look at how we're operating programs and looking at how other districts are operating programs and think if there are other options, financial options for this fiscal year and beyond. So I circulated to board members. I didn't have enough copies for everybody. I'm sorry about that. My printer was slow. It took 4 hours to do, 15 copies. So, that's the most I could do. Basically, that's what I want to put before the board. That the teacher said something really interesting, I think, in their summary. They talked about, really need sort of a holistic approach to this. And that's why it disturbs me, we focused on, let's close some schools. And I think what they're talking about, or the way I read it was, we need to take a broader view of that. And look not only at, educational values, both sides, as well as really what some alternatives are. I know that the board hasn't been that interested in looking at alternatives. I really think we need to confront that. If you look at cost per pupil numbers across the state, we're pretty high. And I can't tell you that, well, if we do it the same as Mill River or whatever, that's the way to go. But somewhere between the cost per pupil that we're spending and the average cost per pupil, there's a significant amount of money. And if we just need to be open to exploring that. and finding out, is there some better way to do this? There's some other options that I've presented, I've offered. I don't know that they're perfect. I certainly don't claim to be a financial analyst or anything like that. But I think around, if you take a look at collaborating with other districts in the county, both on administration and programming. Taking a look again at the Levinson report, I know in-house, that's not popular. I think some of the survey stuff suggested that those issues could be looked at. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was Meredith, the survey that Meredith talked about and how different, I mean, in my mind, Moncton and Bristol probably aren't gonna be close, right? So the targets are, New Haven and Starksville. And New Haven, based on, Kathy, you can tell me if I'm wrong, the survey seemed to suggest that New Haven wasn't all that interested in keeping their schools. So, we should ask people that, whether that's an opportunity.
I guess while we're thinking about the herb. Oh, you said a lot in just a couple of minutes, and I want to sort of walk this line really carefully.
Okay.
Because there's a few things. One, we're a district. And I know that sounds funny to say out loud because we're talking very specifically about individual schools, and the data that we saw in the survey was very specific to individual communities. But when we think about this district, that is what we're thinking about. And I worry about saying, well, Moncton and Bristol aren't interested in blah, 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 because some of the options we're exploring would mean my students are moving as much as any of yours. That's equity and movement. And I just want to pause a little bit to say, our board didn't come here and say, we're going to close schools and here's how we're going to do it. Our board came together and said, actually, our board didn't. Our advisory council had said, here's a year's worth of work we did. How do you think about this? And so we've got 16 options first that we looked at, and we said, we really like to explore 7 a little more heavily. And that's the work we're doing, right? I just want to, it's a really important line to keep, that our first instinct wasn't to say we're going to close schools.
Well,
that's just one point. The second point I want to make is that there's this perception that Levinson report hasn't been used. And I fear that narrative, because the Levinson report has been looked up and down ad nauseum by the Finance and Facilities Committee, explored in many fiscal models, and we use the Levinson report structure in all of our financial modeling. That's what's presented to the community. So I worry about this idea that we're somehow hadn't explored anything that was in Levinson being a narrative that's being followed. So I just want to be careful about that line.
I hear you on that latter point. I think that the board and the committees really have looked at that. There's a couple of things that are different, though. We're in a lot better fiscal mess than we were a few years ago. And why not re-examine some of that stuff? The coaches have come up. They might do a very good job, but when you're in a real fiscal crunch, isn't that something that you should take a look at?
Yeah.
Right? And beyond just the Levinson, there are, we're really looking at a changed environment for schools in Vermont. And a lot of that effort is going to be on consolidating central office services at a county or maybe even bigger level. That should be the focus that I think we should be taking to. Again, rather than just narrowly focusing on reconfiguring or closing elementary schools, take a broader, more holistic look at where the savings might be. On the first point, I totally get it. We are a district. I understand that. I will tell you though that what I hear, and I think a lot of folks, here is that, I mean, it's only 3 years after folks tried to close Robinson before. And I think people remember that history.
Yep.
And I think they feel maybe you're right, Aaron, that people feel they're being targeted. And some of the comments I've heard from board members I think, reinforce that. You know, and I'm thinking about Lincoln, Chiefs, you know, people say, well, Lincoln withdrew. I disagree. I remember those conversations. I think they were pushed out. Right? I think they were pushed out by this board. And I'm really worried that we're creating an environment that has the same sort of tone. Maybe that's not the case. That's just what we're feeling. And I don't want to see that develop.
And I don't either. And I think I'm gonna just be a little defensive for a minute.
Okay.
Over the past 2 years, I feel I have worked tirelessly with this board to generate a board that has reached across the boundaries of community to bring people back into a place where we can have pretty robust conversations in a respectful way. And we're not always perfect, and we recognize that. To do that work of mending what had happened. You're not wrong that the perceptions of what happened are really bad, right? And we hold on to that. But over the past 2 years, we've worked pretty relentlessly to change our trajectory to have this conversation not end up where it's already headed. And I don't know the variables specifically that made it move into this sort of fight or flight stage we're at, but we're here. With no intention of the board that I feel of ending up here. And I want to call that out into space because it's been exhausting. Frankly, right? So, and we're all in that exhausted state of being. So what I wonder about, and I wonder openly with the board and community at large, is how do we have hard conversations about what is actually best and be creative with it without this idea of feeling targeted? And how do we get there?
Yes,
Like
I'd have one suggestion. Instead of trying to build a fiscal year 27 budget that seems to us to be focused on closing schools, why not look at as many different alternatives as you can to make that budget work? It seems like from back in June, this has been the focus as opposed to taking a look at other stuff. And if communities thought that the board was really looking sincerely, you know, at what else could be done to meet the budget and make the taxes at a reasonable level, I think we'd go a lot. I think we'd be building it. I agree, you know, I think you've done a great job, Aaron, over the past, and the board over the past 2 years. And something went wrong, you know, I think this past spring around, you know, I think focusing too narrowly on, you know, these one set of options in terms of facilities and stuff like that. If we expanded the options, expanded the inquiry, I think that might go a long way towards, you know, maybe bending some stuff.
Sure. Sorry, it's okay. I'd like to chime in. So maybe I'm off base and maybe I've been on the wrong road this whole time, but I'm not anticipating through all of this work that there's gonna be schools closed for the FY 27 budget. Like, that's not reasonable to think that we could potentially do that in, I don't know, it's late, it might be off. Right? Like, we can't do that. Like, so in my brain, we were going down this path of what does our future as a district look like? That's not 27. And we have to look at how are we gonna get through 27 without crippling our constituents with a huge tax increase. We have 2 paths that we're marching along simultaneously. So maybe that's where things went off, is that there's a feeling that this, and again, if I'm off base, board members, and you are in a different place, please challenge me here. But maybe that's where the divisiveness has become, because we're feeling like this is happening in the next 3 to 6 months. And in my mind, there's absolutely no way we can do that in the next 3 to 6 months and do it well. It would be a disservice.
Yeah, Brad.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Liz's point. I think that the discussion about reconfiguration, which has now led to different models for educational delivery started with the finance committee meeting in the spring. And as I recall that finance committee meeting, it was about visioning. It was, long-term, what is our district gonna look like over time? It had nothing to do, again, I could be wrong, but this is my recollection. It had nothing to do with fiscal, school year 2027 budget, or maybe not even, school year 2028 budget. Because at the time, we knew that there was rumblings that the state legislature was working on what ultimately became Act 73. And the charge, as I understood it, was to put out there, what are some of the, big ideas we can be thinking about over time? That somehow, translated into a much more focused presentation that was made at the August retreat, which really suggested that we're looking at reconfigurations for 2027. I think the last line of the presentation was talking about a timeline for adopting a budget that presumably would include some sort of reconfiguration. And I think that's kind of where we may have gone off the tracks.
Which we've since kind of.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Sarah.
Because I wasn't there. I did read the materials, but Brad, when that was suggested, because I'm sort of I'm with Melissa a little bit on this, trying to figure out, how we got to tonight in some ways. That reconfiguration, did you believe that was fueled mostly by conversations of things coming from the state level, or the board as a group saying we have to do something fairly immediately?
I think it was exacerbated by the fact that the state was, moving on this new legislation. But we all recognize, given the difficulties of passing budgets over the last 2 or 3 years, that over the long term, unless something drastically changes, we have to come up with something creative. So, I agree with what Herb was saying. I think that there are an awful lot of creative ways that we have not explored, because frankly, I think there are folks out there who say that the easiest solution here is let's just close some schools and be done with it. I think that there are other things that we need to look at. As far as the Levinson report is concerned, I agree. I mean, we did look at it last year. Times have changed, as Herb said, but and even in the materials that Herb has and Chris and I have put together, the dollar amounts, flowing from taking up the recommendations by Levinson are fairly modest. But the underpinning of the Levinson report also is something, it encompasses this notion of administrative consolidation and combining forces, with other entities, and trying to find ways to streamline how we administer our educational delivery systems. Levinson wasn't so much about educational delivery systems, but more about how do we organize what we're doing.
Right. Can I just say one more thing? I had the opportunity to read what was sent out, some of the thoughts that you put together tonight. I think there's a lot of creative ideas in there. And then my follow-up would be, I mean, have we explored about local other districts wanting to consolidate? I mean, because we can have a lot of ideas. We can have a whiteboard session. And when I was reading through that, I thought it was well done, but there was a lot of whiteboard-like ideas in there. And I'm just wondering, how do we vet out? I mean, are the local communities that border with us interested in that? Is that something that's coming from the state? Do we want to initiate it? I just think there's so many questions. And, none of us do this full time. So I don't want to sound like I'm backing away from work, but I'm also like, when we're talking about redesigning the entire district, as somebody in the audience suggested earlier, based on, each town has a different school with a need that meets the children. I mean, that is a huge undertaking.
Kathy?
I think that you've done a tremendous disservice,
heard and stating to the public and to anybody listening that the board has not been interested in looking at other alternatives, because if you haven't been with us for the last 3 years, when we have looked at a lot of different alternatives, ways of saving funds. And we are not out to get Starksboro. I don't want that to, New Haven is not out to get Starksboro, and I'd like to put that to bed and just say we're looking at what's best for all the students and the staff in this district. Patrick, can you explain what you did last year about when you talked to Edison Northwest about collaborations and how far you have gone with that and how much further they're interested in going?
I think you're referring to the course-based choice,
No, we're
collaboration.
talking about administratively and the course-based piece.
Yeah, so almost every year when there's some sort of a turnover in one of our central offices, in particular Addis Northwest and MAUSD, we have a long-standing working relationship. We currently share lots of things, probably more than any two other districts in the state. But we continually look at opportunities to collaborate around central office functions. Some things are more feasible than others. Like there are some things that, in our opinion, in our experience, you really can't share without actually merging and becoming one.
Can you be specific with that, please?
We looked at as high as business managers with turnover, like so when before Floyd was hired. So this goes back, this is year 5 for you, Floyd? 6. So we explored when we had a turnover in a business manager position, explored that notion with Addis Northwest, like, is it feasible for one business manager to manage these 2 districts combining for $60-70 million as 2 separate entities, 2 separate reporting up to all the realities that come with that. And the reality check was it just wasn't feasible to do that in that structure. So we did pursue that. We hired our own business manager and continued on. We've looked at that with facilities managers. We currently share a food service director, athletics and activities, a course-based choice. So we continue to look at those things.
And course-based choices, we've been successful with.
I suppose that depends on how you define success. We were successful in creating the structure that made it possible.
There you go.
0 students are participating.
So I'm sorry you think it's a disservice. I think things are changing, Kathy, for all of our districts. And what I'm seeing is that if you really want some cost savings, you really might need to think about consolidating central office services. And when I put out the idea of, yeah, we should explore that. I didn't suggest you could do the whole thing. I took some of the numbers from Mr. Levinser's report, discounted them, quite a bit to reflect, I think, some of the concerns that the superintendent has. I think the board needs to be in charge. And if the board really wants to do that, they need to send a signal to the administration. This is something that we really want to do. Right now, I don't think the administration thinks the board thinks it's all that important. There are potential savings there.
Please don't put words in my mouth than what I think. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. I think that the board needs to be really clear. If they want to do something, they need to be very clear about it.
And I think that's a
and I
discussion
think
for us
that-
to have in committee meetings and in the board meeting, not in a meeting that's been called specifically to look at the options for tonight.
What I'm suggesting is that we need to look beyond those options, Kathy. We need to think about other things besides for these particular items.
And I hear you, Herb, and we have done that work, and you were not a part of it. So I'm happy to look at it. I think it's great to look at other alternatives. what this meeting, the purpose of this meeting was to look at the alternatives that we have on the table tonight. And we can discuss more specific options when we're given the information more than at 10:38 the night before.
Okay, now, so,
So I
you
think
know,
that,
so
I really,
Kathy,
I really think that on the
I,
point of order,
I have a,
that this point of order is called, that this is straying beyond what the intent of the meeting was.
The only caveat is we were allowing for other options to be added for consideration, and so Herb's list of considerations is serving that purpose of having alternatives presented, so.
Yeah.
So that would be appropriate in this context.
So I would caveat the point of order in that they have been raised and now it's time to move on.
so I just need to talk about the late delivery. Yeah, I didn't, I apologize for that, but you have to understand that the information that I was waiting for to try to put something like this together only came Thursday or Friday. So I was in a time crunch. I certainly wouldn't want to do that again if I had been able to send it out earlier, Kathy.
One thing that I think has been really clear is the idea that, you know, we need to reach outside of our own district and be really conferring with others. And I know the board has asked me to do that, to reach out, and I've had meetings with other board chairs. I just called for another one. I asked the board chairs in the district, which includes Hannaford Career Center, and Lincoln. We're gonna be meeting tomorrow evening, so just so you are all aware of that happening. Because part of these creative solutions that we keep, you know, putting in quotations because that's all we have right now, right? Is like, we do wanna be creative. We just don't have the means to speak for anyone else in terms of what that creativeness looks like. And I don't disagree that, but we have done that work in the past, and I don't disagree, we put a lot of effort into that. What that looks like now in the face of Vermont doing what it's doing could be totally different. So that has not fallen on deaf ears for me. All that to say, it doesn't negate needing to move in a direction that makes us financially stable over 27. In order to do that, it feels like we need to pick a direction that we'd like to be heading in. If that direction is we're keeping all schools open, and in the interim, cutting around the edges like we've been doing, or finding other creative solutions in that meantime, so be it. And I'm not married to any option. I don't think any of us are at this point in time, but it feels important that we start to shift toward a direction so that at least we know what we're doing, right?
Fair enough.
Okay, and then later in October, our next board meeting, our business meeting, we'll be starting to think about what is a feasible financial target for our administration to start building around. Last year, we took the approach of let's not set a number target so much as let's set a tax number target, right? Not to exceed in terms of tax impact. That might be the way we go again this year to mitigate some of this, right? To give us some breathing room. Again, that's for discussion. It feels important that we digest everything we've talked about today,
Sure.
given what Truex Collins had, what you have, what our advisory council has done, right?
Yeah.
In order to start really putting some thought on what does that look like as a district, right? So we did have on the agenda, and not to, we can keep talking if we need to, an action item to sort of think about options to advance for further study. And if none of this feels like we want to explore that any further. If option A feels like it's what we're looking at as our direction, fine. Right? If not, if we have other options, that's fine. But it's important that at least we're pointing all the same direction to say, yes, this is the direction we're looking, and that's not to negate any of that creativity that we're seeking. That's just to have a direction to move. We can be flexible about options. This is not the end all be all of things. I think in previous board meetings, we've said we need to have option A, B, C, and X. Because we just don't know what's coming down the line for us. So if we can be thoughtful about, if we don't want this action item, I'm also okay tabling that, knowing that we're putting ourselves at a slight disadvantage for creative work or thinking towards fiscal year 27 in particular, because that's, you know, next month, right? But then what happens 28, 29? We need to be moving. Again, with flexibility, because who knows?
Right.
There was a gentleman who had his hand up.
Oh,
And two, sorry.
okay, 1 second, please.
Sure.
Okay, so at this board table, I need a general consensus of, do we feel like we're going to move on this action item to think about options, or are we not thinking about that? Yeah, Liz.
Also, they presented us with two other options.
Yep, and we have herbs considerations.
Yes, the herbs consideration. Do we have a slide or something that, a way to see? There was one of them that I've already forgotten.
G.1,
I was, there were two other options that Truex presented us, so I was wondering if those would also be on, something that maybe we could have on a slideshow or have up there for us to consider tonight as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's good.
Along
point.
with yours.
That kind of cut, that was kind of out of the blue for me. I couldn't remember what those options were. And I haven't frankly really thought about them.
Yep.
Patrick?
Because it makes a decision about those without thinking about them a little more, but.
Patrick, can I just ask in terms of timeline, if it's important for us to give a rough target at the end of the month? If at that same time, what information would you need to then go from that target to a budget that you would present to us, given the uncertainty surrounding the potential options? In other words, if we told you options today, would that better help you prepare to receive that target? Or if it's other option alongside that target, would that be sufficient? Or do you think that even in the absence of options from the board, you could still come up with a budget if we gave you a target? Like, how do you see those intersecting so that we can keep making sure that there's opportunity for back and forth with the board and yourself and the community regarding FY 27? Because while I do recognize the hesitancy of all this information, I also know that if we don't get a budget out to the community, at least the first draft, until we're ready to vote on it, then we've created a whole nother can of worms. Whatever, like, and we're just gonna get the other side of the problem. Like, somehow we're threading the needle. I'm gonna just do all the phrases I know. And put it on 15. Like, somehow we have to figure that out. So can you give a little perspective on what you would need when to try to keep this moving while giving us the opportunity to mold and build?
For me, the main thing really comes down to the potential use of one-time funds to buy some time. And do we make that decision with clarity of direction? Or do we make that decision in absence of clarity of direction? The risk being, if we use $2 million of one-time funds to buy down that $3 million gap, great, maybe we've solved FY 27, and the FY 28 hole is now $2 million bigger. And if we don't have a sense of direction, it's very, very risky to make that move, kind of blindly. So that's mostly where that comes down, right? And so the impact then on budget building is, am I presenting you a budget that uses $2 million of one-time funds and doesn't make the reductions? And we're probably pretty happy with that. Or is my charge to bring you a budget that doesn't use one-time funds and makes reductions to get the full $3 million, which is a very different story. So that to me is what is sort of hinging upon in terms of how I would bring a budget to you with a target. And I could bring, here's the two scenarios.
Meredith?
Thank you.
I would hate to see all the work that we've done go to waste. So even if it is for FY 28 and we are using one-time funds for FY 27, I still think we've done a lot of work to narrow down options, and I'd be in favor of continuing to narrow down our options for further study and capitalizing on the momentum we've built and the work that we've done.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, well, I agree with what Meredith just said. I mean, we've done a lot of work and it should continue. But whether it should be shoehorned into the 2027 budget, I think that that's just a non-starter. And I understand and I see the risks in using one-time funds, but until we know more about what the state's gonna do either this year or next year, I'm not sure we have much choice but to use the one-time funds and just, and just, I don't wanna say it's a roll of the dice, but, we're gonna have to, we might have an even bigger challenge next year that could happen, or maybe not, but we just don't know.
I think in an effort to be totally transparent, we should look at them side by side. I think that's the best that we can do, is say, if we use the one-time funds, this is what it's gonna could look like. Of course, everything depends on the yield coming out of Montpelier, which Herb, we're relying on you to take care of that.
No problem, Kevin.
Yeah, take a look at it with one-time funds and without.
I'll make sure there's a designated, appropriation just for our district.
There you go.
So I'm trying to get a sense of, are we moving on this action or are we tabling it?
I'd be in favor of tabling it to the next meeting.
Okay.
So when we're setting the target, with the idea being that there was a lot of new information from a lot of different sources, right? Like, we've been hearing, we want to hear from the community, and we got 592 voices, like amazing. We wanted to hear from staff, faculty, and they spent an entire in-service thinking about these ideas, and we got feedback from them and the advisory committee. And I think from my perspective, it was really valuable to go beyond just, these are the financial constraints, to these are the financial constraints, and these are all of the other associated vantage points that help us really think about what does education look like going forward. But on a personal level, I'd have a hard time synthesizing everything that happened today.
Yeah.
Including new information, which is valuable.
Yeah.
To say, yeah, I'm definitely set on these three at this moment.
Yeah.
But I'd be pretty cautious to kick that can too much further, so that we did come to a place where even if we did have a path forward, we've now cut off the possibility for FY 28 and beyond.
Yeah.
In much the same way that we ran here.
Yeah.
So kind of trying to fit that with, yes, we now have a couple of weeks as individual board members to mull over what we had and come prepared ideally with the things that we are really excited to explore and the things that we're really not excited to explore. So that can proceed in parallel with Patrick providing, excuse me. And that is that hour of the night, Patrick providing both of those approaches for FY 27.
Awesome.
And then you have both of those occurring.
You're threading your needle.
I'm trying. I am absolutely trying.
Liz?
Yeah, the tricks are big.
Yeah, I need that in front of me.
To be able to digest it.
Liz and then Meredith.
So if we're gonna do this, I don't feel like our community engagement committee can move forward, like, we're counting on you guys. Right, like for us to make decisions and dig deeper and then share that out for everybody. So community engagement committee is committed to sharing out all of the information that we get, diving deeper into a couple of options that we're moving forward with. So my suggestion was gonna be that if we have our committee meetings, instead of our committee meetings next, that maybe it could be a full board meeting. Because we already took our committee meeting tonight, if our regular full board meeting could be a full board meeting. We're not asking for any further details necessarily, so take those 2 weeks, because I feel like our committee needs this, right? And then, because we want to go to select boards, we're gonna show up with information, but this is kind of like a crucial
Piece of it.
Yeah.
Meredith?
I wanted to say something similar. I hear Mike and would love to have the luxury of time to digest and synthesize information. I also want to point out that our community overwhelmingly wants us to communicate with them and inform them and speak to them. I think it was Tirza who said earlier that even though we got 592 responses on our survey, there are still people at her kids' soccer field that weren't aware of what we were doing. So every time we wait to synthesize information and to think things through and mull things over, that's time that we're taking for ourselves that we're not taking communicating with our community. And we have a deadline. We have to get a budget in front of them by town meeting day. We don't have a choice in that. So I think we should weigh, is it more important for us to take our time and think things through, or is it more important for us to make decisions so that we can then bring that back to our community and keep them informed of what we're doing and bring them into the decision-making process?
so for me, I'm gonna use your phrase, that the needle that I'm trying to thread right now, Meredith, like for me, I heard so much, like that whole Truex Collins whatever presentation tonight. While only one piece of our puzzle had a ton of information, and I have been up since 4:30 AM and I haven't been able to synthesize everything I saw on those screens in a way that I could feel like I can make a decision that's grounded in some sort of reasoning. Not everybody has to agree with my reasoning, but some sort of reasoning to say, I feel confident in saying, this is my vote, or whatever the right word is, to move it forward. So I totally hear you. Time is a non-renewable resource and we are constantly running out of it, but I personally need the time to make an informed decision that likely some people will disagree with, but at least I can feel confident in the decision I made.
And I think too, Meredith, to your point, you know, us taking 2 weeks to digest is not 2 weeks of rest. Right? We can be sending out all the information that we had in ways that are scaffolded, right? Like that have the Truex Collins report available and digestible, but there's lots of work we can be doing asynchronously to sort of mitigate what you're saying in that time crunch scenario, which feels important, right? Because we do want to continue to feed the community and have them feed us back. So I just wanna point that out, like if we do give ourselves these 2 weeks, I think it's a reasonable 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks doesn't mean we're not saying anything to the community just because we're not making the next forward step. Right? I guess I'm just gonna ask for thumbs. Because that feels the most diplomatic. So thumbs up if you want to table the action item of determining options to advance for further study to October 28th, which would be our next business meeting. Okay, that's an overwhelming majority. Okay. So someone please, yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're clear. I mean, the folks have put a lot of time into this whole
Totally.
process.
Yep.
You know, and it's deeply respected. I just want to make sure that you don't kick this can, as Mike says, down the road. And that's the whole trajectory that the Facilities and Finance Committee started with almost a year ago.
Yeah.
In saying we can't keep kicking it down the road. And we're hearing from our constituents that they want us to take action.
Yeah.
So I would gladly make the motion that we table decision tonight until the October 28th meeting.
Yes, thank you, Kathleen.
Second.
Mike second.
And now that I made the motion, I would encourage everybody to keep coming back to our meeting, because this is such valuable input for all of us.
All those in favor of tabling the action item to determine options to advance for further study to October 28th, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Thank you, Meredith. Any abstentions? Okay. The motion passes. I'm now gonna move to opening public comment. Nancy.
I think I probably want to be clear about what I think I heard. You know, I think I heard, not just tonight, but at the last full board meeting, that, Patrick, you're pretty clear that for FY 27, if you think about the 7 options, or are there 9 that are still on the table, those are all things that we wouldn't expect to be able to put into place for FY 27, for the 26-27 school year. And so, well, except for that one where we keep the current number of schools and the current grade configuration and build a budget on that. I think that's what you said last time and what you're confirming tonight. Is that the case?
It would be a Herculean effort to
Okay.
implement any one of those.
Okay, so given that, I just want to say that the idea of building an FY 27 budget with the current number of schools we have and basically the current grade configurations in those schools. I just want to confirm what I think is true is that one way to do it will be to use some or all of the one-time funds that are available to you. But there may be some other alternatives that, you know, were outlined in some of what the Starksboro members of the board put forward that might help you use fewer one-time funds in order to make that happen. I mean, I think I think I understand that that's something you're open to, that the board is open to, and that that might help lay some groundwork for decisions you might be making for FY 28.
Yeah, I think the board is interested in doing that digging so we can direct the superintendent to look in those places for our budget.
And I think it's also true that for FY 28, in addition to the education delivery models that you're considering so far, you're also very mindful that in the meantime, at the state level, the redistricting task force is very recently and very currently been looking in some detailed depth at a BOCES model that has the potential to save all districts a considerable amount of money. So that, and certainly that might take some time to put into place, but that the understanding about that and the finding out more about it is certainly gonna be able to inform any decisions that you make for FY 28 and beyond. I think that that is true. Is that true?
I was aware that there are certain members of the redistricting task force that put together a BOCES model idea that I did share to the whole board.
Yeah.
So we are aware that that is a potential offering that some people of the redistricting task force offered, yes.
And so if that BOCES model has the potential to create the kinds of savings that we're all looking for, it would be wise to be very careful not to overcompensate about our around closing schools or doing any other drastic measures before we really get a sense of what potential in savings that approach or a similar approach would offer.
That's one interpretation. Yep.
Sleep at night.
Yeah.
I just have a question. Is New Haven ambivalent or desirous of closing their school?
From the feedback that I've received as a representative, there's a mixed bag as there is in every community. But the feeling is that the students may benefit from being a part of a larger student body.
I do. Go ahead. Kathy, can you also speak to the community work that's happening in your town? There's an organization, the Rural something is coming in and helping develop your town and think about what you want and need and other ways to use the structures in your town. And like Rochester has it, or Roxbury worked with this group to do adult daycare, like a daycare program for adults in their building. And Addison has a child care center, right? So you have an organization, I guess you guys waited a year. So I think that's also impactful, is that kind of thinking and forward thinking about other community needs and community standards and what they can look like. So I wonder.
It's commissioned by the select board in New Haven, and they are working with an agency to look at identifying the needs for the entire community, not just educational needs, but the entire community's needs, wants, and desires.
I just want to throw it out there. I mean, I'm from Starksboro and I don't see any benefit to my community to losing my school. Like I don't see any benefit. And maybe if Beeman would serve your community better as something else, like can't we do a hybrid? Do we have to get rid of those schools? Like can't we consider cost cutting in other ways and making everybody happy? Because right now, when I look at closing our school, it's a lose-lose. It brings me no value at all.
Thank you.
Alan?
$17 million for FY 26 right now. I would hope that the staff has input and a lot of background and help to put this together, because what makes the classroom work is the record keeping that a teacher is able to do, and then have the assistants to help perform what the individual students, and these aren't special ed students or 501. We have a lot of students that come to school that need a little extra help. And it's changed. The parent input is different. We have probably 50% of the parents of the students with parents that are divorced or whatever, which makes a difficult situation. Education is the only, and medicine, that doesn't have a quick fix. So moving on, we have a lot of stuff here. We have $17 million in this budget that I think staff needs to look at to come up with what they need and report to you. When is the budget process gonna start? So let's have some education for staff. They need people in the classroom at certain times to help with certain areas, maybe math, maybe reading, maybe whatever. And I don't, all discussion here doesn't talk about how we get to the trenches to fix the problem. So I'm hoping that this board will get to the trenches and work with the staff. And I'm not talking about the special ed, I'm talking about other students that may need help. And we got a 17 set, almost 10 million for school-based staff. And then we have another 7 million for other school-based staff. We need to look at that and see how we can pull this together, and we need to talk about that tonight. We can't just philosophize, we gotta help the people in the trenches. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Krista?
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been in that seat that you're all sitting in, and it's really hard. So thank you. Briefly, I think, like Nancy said, it will be really interesting to see if the BOCES model gets any traction with the redistricting task force and then with the legislature. But in the meantime, there are things that probably need to be decided now so that the risk of waiting does not have significant negative consequences for the most vulnerable students. And I want to talk about equity, which Herb brought up earlier. So equity in education really means that all students have access to the support and resources they need to succeed, regardless of background and circumstances. What you heard from the teachers, which that conversation and back and forth was really great with the district advisory group. But hearing from them, talking about professional learning communities and grade banding and how this impacts student outcomes, this is even more important for students with disabilities. There is so much that you all have to synthesize in this conversation, but I just really want to urge you not to leave special education, a really close look at special education, out of your consideration. The director of special education for the state recently published a state of special education report, which you may or may not have had time to read through, and you do have a lot to consider. But a few highlights from that report. First, while student enrollment is declining statewide, the percentage of students with IEPs is increasing, as is the intensity and complexity of their needs. In Vermont, the good news is that we're really knocking it out of the park in terms of serving the highest percentage of students on IEPs in the least restrictive environment when you compare us to the national average. But the bad news is that we also send a much higher rate of students out of their home district to specialized or therapeutic schools as compared to the national average and to similar demographically in rural states. And that's because many districts lack the in-house capacity, specialized staff, and specialized resources to serve these students in their community. So we used to have programs like this in MAUSD within each elementary school, and they're costly. And yet they're the way that students with significant needs can sometimes stay in their community school. And if they can't be in their school, financially, it costs a significant amount of money to send them to alternative programs. And this also means that we're sending our most vulnerable students to schools out of their community, away from their families, siblings, and friends. I've heard a lot of folks ask about the length of time students might spend on a bus ride to another town, but I want to advocate for those kids that are not even able to attend their public school because that school does not have the capacity to serve them. I would ask the board to consider, among all of the other factors, what would it cost to have a program in each school that could appropriately and adequately serve all students, including students with the highest and most complex needs? And if we can't currently afford that cost, can we say that we're adequately serving the needs of all students? And how long do we want to wait before we say we are? Thank you.
Krista? Yeah.
Will the architects report and the Starksboro group report and the teachers what it was called, report be available online?
Yep, so everything should be attached to the agenda, which should be out in the next few days. The agenda, yep, everything will be there.
The minutes.
Oh, the minutes, sorry, thank you. Yep.
And I would suggest, going back to the concerns of the, committee, communication committee, whatever it's called, that somehow that word get out there. I've heard people say, I can't even find the minutes, or I can't find the agenda. It's all there, and I saw the stuff that was already linked on the agenda, because I knew where to look, but people don't know that those reports are out there, so I don't know how to do that, whether it's Front Porch Forum, it's all of those, that list of wherever you put it, that communication could go out now. You don't have to communicate about decisions. You can let people know this is what's out there and happening, and this is what the board is struggling with to put the budget together.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't see over there. Go ahead.
I just want to thank both. It's refreshing to be able to converse with you. It hasn't always been this way in the past. I just want to thank being able to talk and listen. Yep.
Next on our agenda, we have an executive session that's under T1 VSA 5313A3. Evaluation of a public officer, so it's our superintendent check-in. I please get a motion to enter. So Melissa first. Kathy second. Yep. Yep. As soon as everyone gets back from bio break.
I'm gonna just go ahead and.
Yes.
I'm gonna step outside of the rules real quick here and
Yeah.
By default.
There's a whole thing like.
Just made this move my weight around.
You're like.
Yeah.